All right, how's it going, everyone? We have another special guest with us today. We're joined by Angela from Sanctuary Satanica. How are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking. So, how long have you been practicing for?
Okay, so is this question pertaining to Satanism, witchcraft? Like, there's different answers.
You get to answer that yourself. You get to
Okay.
start wherever you. Some people say when they were born. Some people say when they started with their current practice. How do you define your current practice? I guess is a good place to start.
I think there's like I'm simultaneously in different dimensions with my witchcraft about when I began
Mhm,
because I look back on like my childhood, like a lot of people, and I'm like, I was doing that. Like, I was doing that naturally, not thinking about it. Some things very specifically witchy, like I didn't know what an altar was, but I had altars to the moon. I
mhm.
don't know. You can't get around that. But like Satanism was something that sort of found me much more recently. And that was something I never predicted I would be a part of, or like certainly not the theistic variety at all. I was like, yeah, I don't know if I can believe in that. I'm not all about that. And I just sort of categorized it as very Christian. So I had a very rude awakening about like 2 years ago. And so
Sure.
um, things changed. I was already sort of left-hand path there because I was doing a lot of chaos magic and I was starting to get into Goetia around that
Okay.
time. So, I was in this interesting like shift around that time to be open to that kind of stuff.
Very interesting. So you mentioned Satanism, and your channel is named Sanctuary Satanica. I think
It
that's
was
very
not
interesting.
always.
It wasn't always okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What was it at first?
I think it went through a few different changes, but like someone said they remember me from like the Spider Tarot days. That was like way back when it was just a tarot channel. And
Okay.
then I Lilith came into my life pretty early in my practice, and she just took over all of my adult practice basically.
Uh-huh.
So I was daughter of Lilith for like the longest time. Some people will still like comment like daughter of Lilith, it's you, and I'm like hi, But there's a million
Okay.
of us like in the satanic community. There's a million daughters of Lilith, so I was like, I'm gonna be I'm gonna be something else. And the name sort of arose like after I had met Satan. Long after I was sort of like in the broom closet about being a Satanist for a bit. Like I just didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know it was a possibility for me at all. I just didn't like know what to do with it. So I'm like very like I know I'm like very fucking open about it now, but like that's how I am once I've accepted something. I'm like, okay, everyone else has to deal with it now. But I was just like, I just didn't know what to do. I just didn't want anyone else commenting on it. I didn't want like other people's I didn't want it to be tainted. I wanted to just experience
Sure.
it for what it was. And I just sort of had like in my process of that, like imagined not a church, not like an organized religion in any fashion or organized like sect, but a place where that kind of spirituality could just exist. And so I
Right.
just like imagined like a sanctuary, and I was like, oh yeah, and I just felt weird calling it like satanist or whatever. I wanted to like yassify it. I wanted it to be like girly. I wanted it to be like too gay for a Nazi to touch. Like I want so, and like Satan just sort of said satanica to me, and I had no idea that in Spanish that means satanic, so it means like satanic
Mhm,
sanctuary
mhm.
in Spanish.
Yeah,
So
it's
like,
beautiful.
yeah, and I was like, oh okay, like it just kind of fit. It sounded
Mhm.
feminine. It sounded like just something where like, and I was like, when I began making content about that, I was really resonating with and like getting the attention of other women in the community that were sort of like on the rise, and I was like, yeah, I'm feeling this.
So it ended up being a sanctuary in more than one way for more than one type of person. That's beautiful, and I love the idea of it being a sanctuary too, because a lot of us more left-handed path magicians tend to think about this practice as being very chaotic and tend to think of like pandemonium. But for some of us, that is a sanctuary. For some of us, being able to just let out that noise and that chaos is very cathartic and can feel like a sanctuary. So
Yeah.
you mentioned meeting Satan. Can you tell us what that means for you? I know it's highly subjective and I know it's hard to talk about, but what does that mean for you, for those of
I guess, yeah. I guess if I'm going to correct myself, it's more like discovering Satan. And I think in one of my
Okay.
videos, I described it as like coming home to him in a way. It was more or less like this like ridiculous revelation of I say ridiculous because it was intense. Um like it was this intense revelation of like I never was Christian. I never gave a shit about it. Like I was shoved into a Bible school like for daycare purposes for a bit.
Oh my God.
And they had a talk with my mother and they kicked me out of it.
They found out very
Never
early.
went back. Oh, that's a whole different story. I do believe that's possible. That was the first time I heard Satan's voice. I was telling a story about that in church, and that like, didn't go.
Oh yeah, they probably didn't
I
like
didn't
that.
know who it was at the time, but like, yeah. But I, as like an adult, reading and recognizing and like discovering Satan, that was. I talked a bit about it in my video. I think it's like the devil in me or something like that. But that was when I started like really incorporating a lot more cannabis in my practice, and I was getting to states of consciousness I didn't normally reach. And there was like a moment where I was just like, I would just vibe at my altar. I would just like, I
I
just
get
do
it.
it altar like a lot of the time. And I was vibing there, and I kept feeling this presence like show up. And I was like, you seem really cool, but you scare the shit out of me. And I'm not ready for that. I'm too fucking high right now. You gotta go wait. Like, and I kept like pushing it back and pushing it back. And like, there was just something. I'm very like clairaudient. I'm very into like using music to get into altered states of consciousness.
Mhm.
And I'll covet the song for now. I think I'll like keep it to myself for now. But there was a song that I just felt this presence, and I was getting interested. I was taking traditional witchcraft more seriously. I think I was like
Mhm.
getting more into that vein of things, like British traditional derivatives that are now in America that are, I can't really call them British traditional witchcraft, but
Mhm.
regional folkloric practice. And the witch's devil is a huge thing, in that practice. And so I was like just kind of warming up to that idea. I was just warming up to that idea of like, oh, a devil existing, not having anything to do with the Abrahamic anything.
I see.
And
Okay.
the experience of meeting that presence and him coming to me, it was similar to like when I had Lilith come to me and I had asked her why she didn't want me to call her like Lily Sue or like any of her like, Lilaki or any of her like more pagan names. I was like, why do you want me to call you like your Jewish name? Like isn't this like the version of you that is the most hated and the most like, and she was just like, oh yeah, like because if you don't love me there, like what the fuck are you doing?
That
And
makes
so it was
perfect
very much
sense.
a similar vibe. It was like that he had demanded to me that like he is Satan. And that to me awakened something. I was like, there's something I need to learn, like because the divine, infernal, whatever, like none of them really have like these solid forms or names or shit we give them, right? Like they're not really
Right.
beholden to sigils, which is why any of us could channel any fucking sigil and still contact the same spirit. Um, so when they come to you with a name and with a face and all this stuff, like I think it says a lot more about you and what that spirit like has planned for you. And so I was like, since this name has come to me, clearly it is this force and it makes sense. But like this name has come to me, or this title has come to me
Mhm.
when I've had nothing to do with it for so long and I've been in denial of its existence. Like, what does that mean? Like, what do I have to discover here? So let me just like figure this out. And it was like the most, loving, compassionate, and yet like powerful and terrifying like energy I've ever felt in my life. It was like
Sure.
nothing else was like that. So I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. The whole world has been upside down, and I now know everything. I was like in this really like weird spiritual awakening, like trying to avoid, falling off the deep end. And I remember like at the time I was in a completely different place at that time. Mentally, socially, etc. And the people around me were like, "What's going on with you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I
Mhm.
don't know. It's just a spiritual awakening. Just ignore me. Like, it's fine." Like,
It's hard to
I'm
explain.
contemplating everything now. Like, I don't know what everything means. Like,
Man, so you mentioned feeling a presence, and you mentioned being very like clairaudiently aware. And then you mentioned also visions. So it seems like you've done a lot of work or just naturally have a lot of subtle senses. Um, is there certain practices that you've done for that, or is that just something that you have always had?
Well, I mean, like, I definitely wouldn't have described myself as like psychic, and I still really don't, even though
Sure. I don't
I
like, yeah.
professionally read cards and shit like that. But like, I resent that because I feel like it builds all this expectation in people, and there's a lot of this crap that came out of mediums of like, oh, God gave me a gift. It makes it sound like it's not accessible to people, and I fully believe like all of this is innately in the human brain and innately accessible. Some of us have easier times with like clairvoyance or clairaudience or clairsent. Like for me, the first gift I had, I think that was more consistent besides like genetically, like my father, my sister and I, like we all have dreams of the future occasionally. I'm not the best at like spotting them ahead of time. You know, my dad was the best at that. He trained his brain to like see it way ahead of time and describe it way ahead of time. To the point that he kind of had like a moment of madness one day. It was all deja
I
vu all day.
believe it.
But like you know, there's things like that that are definitely like genetically impacted in there. But I think like it's good to exercise all the gifts you can sort
I
of like
love it.
exercising all your muscles, right? And there's definitely practices, but honestly, um, meditating every day, interacting with different energies. So if you've been meditating in the same space for a while, like go to a different space. A lot
I
of
love it.
vampirism taught
Mhm.
me how to interact with energy around me, but also a lot of that did come to me naturally. I remember reading the Michelle Belanger book and reading like the little section on advanced feeding, and I was like, oh shit, I've been I've been doing the tendril thing to my classmates, like, you know, it's like, oh crap, like,
Same.
you know,
I
and
that's
you know, I learned how to interact with like, um, I really stabilized when I stopped like reaching out to people energetically. I was like anchoring myself in nature, and it kind of explained why, as a kid, like I had an easier time with animals than other
mhm.
kids for a bit. Like other kids liked me, but I was like, nah, I want to talk to this dog. Like, you know, I want to hang out with this cat. I don't want to hang out with all you kids that want to play tag and shit. I just want to pet a dog. Like,
I get it. It's
yeah.
animals are awesome. And it's funny you mentioned the tendrils and vampirism as well. It's something that I noticed pretty early on. I was in school one day and I just noticed how weird it was how every time I would be looking at someone across the room, they would like turn around and look at me. And I was like, and I just got this image of like in my mind's eye of like my tendril like pulling on their tendril. And like ever since then, I'm like, what's going on with these like tendrils? And then I realized that it was essentially vampirism in one way or another, connecting with people, sharing energy, because I've done a lot of healing as well. And I didn't realize that I was using vampirism for healing. And I
Yes.
learned that through another thing that you're talking about that I absolutely love. You were talking about exercising, like muscles, your different things, and exploring. I love alliteration, and I have a terrible memory, so I use alliteration to help me remember things. One of the alliterations that I use is explore, expand, and exercise. And so that's explore the different like scrying. How many different ways can you scry? And once you've done that, expand on it. What can you scry about? And then when you figure that out, exercise it. And this is how
Mhm.
you increase your ability as a practitioner. So I absolutely love that you're talking about that. That's something that I try to talk
I
about as
love
well.
the explore part, and I'm going to bounce off that because so many of the skills that I can do, I don't know where, you know, all of them come from, or they were just, I've sought the right opportunity, or there's something in my ancestry, but like came from exploring a different thing. You
Yes.
know, it's an embarrassing story about a cringier time in my craft, but I remember I was fiercely like casting on this guy I wanted the attention of, and I had like a mirror, right? And it was Lilith's mirror. That's important.
Mm-mm.
And I was like, and this was during the day, like an idiot. And I was like, I was like projecting energy through the mirror, and that's all I was doing. I wasn't trying to like see anything. And I shit you not, and I hope this guy never sees my channel. Like, fuck that guy. But like, I somehow like could see, I like fell into the mirror a bit. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. And I was like seeing the inside of someone's bathroom and like literally like face to
Just
face. I was like,
beaming them
shit,
with,
you saw
yeah.
me like fucking dipped out. I was like, didn't know I could do that. Oh no. Like, I was just like, I'm gonna stop. Like, knowing Lilith, she was like, okay, girl, like, you want his attention? There it is. Did you want it? No, you didn't. Like,
Careful what you wish for, right?
yeah. So I mean, like, and the scrying thing, you know, just normal scrying. I think I never intended. I use like my black mirror as like a focus, and I take just chalk marker and I draw the sigil
Love it.
on
Yeah.
it. And I never intended to like see anything in it, but you find that like the longer you're staring at it without an expectation, the more opportunity there is to see things. Like, and I started trying it without any sigil on it and just gazing into the darkness. And recently I've been very recently, there's some pictures on Instagram. I was able to go out to a location that's been like abandoned, and there was a structure that has like a window that just led into the darkness, and like having the light and the candles and everything in front of that makes it this like pit of darkness you can scry on. And it reminded me of something I read from, I think, Constantinos. He was talking about scrying just on the darkness, sitting in complete
Love it.
darkness. And I remember doing that as a kid with like one of the goddesses I first worked with, and it was like freaky as all hell. And you're at risk for possession. I'll say that you're at risk for possession when you sit in the dark and you just are like open to everything. So, you know, protect your space.
Make sure you draw in a circle if you're going to be scrying into the darkness as a 7-year-old, guys.
I was 13,
So,
but
yeah, hey, yeah. So what are you mentioned tarot and you mentioned vampirism and scrying. What are some of your other favorite practices?
well, I love anything like folk magic I can get my hands on. All the little
Love it.
dirty things that you think of with witchcraft. Like,
Mhm.
if I could have a mandrake to raise right now, I would be doing it. Like, I'd probably forget about it. I'd probably die. And I'd probably feel terrible. But like, I don't curse my whole life. But you know, ADHD. But I love like, I love building poppets. I love like
Me too.
constructing things. I love dressing candles. I love taking my athame and like carving into an object. Like, I just love how physical witchcraft is, because I could never fully get into, like, yeah, I just mentioned the vampirism, but I couldn't really fully get into like this purely just you know, mind magic stuff. I needed something on paper, something in my
Hands-on.
hand, something to manipulate, because I was like, if I'm not grounded here physically, it's gonna take too long to fucking get to me. You know,
I
like,
totally get that.
and I remember like even other like folk witches talking about just even touching your own fingers to link something physically here. And I always would like make a mark in like the earth, or, you know, anoint something with spit if you have nothing else. Like, I would always do something, is some physical act. And you find that the more witchcraft you do, the more witchcraft kind of just like spontaneously comes out of you. You don't always know where it comes from, you know, until you like retroactively research it or something.
I love that. Yeah, it's like that bolt of inspiration and intuition just kicks in. I'm the same way when it comes to folky stuff. I love one of my favorite things to do is to like either channel or like design a sigil and then carve it into a candle, and like to take correspondent herbs and put it into the candle. And another thing that I like to do is to make a poppet or like a fetiche almost like out of clay, and to like work those herbs and oils like into that. Ah, man, just getting my hands dirty. It's like, you know, it's coming down to earth. Like, you know, it's gonna manifest because you've worked the earth with your own hands and you've put your love or an intention into it. You know,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yes. I mean, I love my mortar and pestle. I love like,
Yes.
I love making oils. That's my favorite thing. Oils. I made several like washes, because I'm not using Florida water no more. Not out of any like statement, like, don't know where it's coming from. I don't know who the hell's making it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just over it. Like, I'm like, I live in a place where I could buy any magical item fucking around me anywhere. But I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm starting to feel everyone's energy all the fuck over it. You know what I mean? And I'm like, like, so I've been making my own. I was like, I'm gonna make my own like henna wash or whatever the fuck I want to call it. Like, I'm going to make shit that's attuned to my practice and makes sense, to cleanse the shit that I actually want to get rid of versus the stuff I want to keep. This is the thing when you're on like a dark path, everyone's like, let's clean negativity out. I'm like, no, I was doing shadow work with that. You keep it there. Okay. That's where my
I
notes
needed
are. I'm
that.
gonna lose my place. Like, I need that there, that specific area, that negativity. I'm cursing someone tomorrow. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we all get to a point in our practice where I was just talking about this in either the last interview or the one before it, where there's this magical point where in any craft or art where you get to this point where you are the one who is better off doing the thing. Like if you're learning guitar, when you first learn, you don't know shit about guitar. You don't know what the best kind of guitar is or strings or tuning is, so you have to listen to somebody else. But at some point in your practice, you know what you want out of your craft. You know what herbs are best. You know what oils are best. You getting your hands dirty is better than having someone else do it for you, because like you said, like you can feel their juju on it, and or like they're trying to take yours off of it, and it's like, no, I have that exactly how I want it. And there's such a magical time period where that happens, where you know, like, no, I'm going to do this myself.
yeah, exactly. Like it's this point where you get a little frustrated with books. I think like, you're just like, why does nothing feel new? You know, and it really, it just takes like doing it and being it. And I always say like to anyone, I'm like, any part of your craft that you can craft
Yes.
yourself, like do it. Like please do it. I think a lot of people now, with how visible, let's say, certain forms of witchcraft are, not so much our neck of the woods,
Mhm.
although, you know, things trend. Um, I feel like a lot of people think it's like this, I have to get all these things together now. Even when I've, you know, some years after I first got into like Wicca all that time ago,
Sure.
I remember someone telling me I can't be Wiccan, it's too expensive. And I was like, are you kidding me? I have no money. I don't even have a bank account yet. Like, I was like, I don't even have a bank account yet. The hell you mean it's too expensive? I live in the middle of nowhere. You know, I didn't live in Salem then. Like, if I lived in Salem, then I would have everything. But it's like, I
Uh,
was like, what the fuck you mean expensive? Like, I had a clay pot that I made myself. I had like a crystal and a little tea light candle. I don't even know what I had. I had like the bare fucking minimum, but I made it work for me. And I
yeah.
went outside, you know. So it just disappointed. I think a lot of people now too are like, there there's so many opinions about the craft being set all the time. And
Yeah.
sometimes when you hear them, you know what platform they came from. And like, but you're like, okay, you know,
That's
and you
funny.
have like people where I am, you have people in real life asking you questions, and that's always interesting, you know.
Mhm.
The kinds of questions that come to me and the kinds of things people are worried about and the kinds of images people want to keep up. Like, you know, I'm working at a new store where there's no mention of hexing anybody, mainly for drama purposes, but I'm just like, okay, well, I disagree with this whole like hexing's always bad. Obviously, I think, you know, oppressed groups have used magic to fight back for a long fucking time. I think, you know, the justice system is not fair to battered people at all in domestic violence situations. So like, I think if you got it, use it, get the fuck out of there, get your lick, get all of it back. Like there's no justice in this world. And so I think like, you know, assuming that magic is this exempt thing that is only evil to punch back when it's magic is ridiculous to me. So
Yeah.
you know, me, if I see someone in need like that, I'm slipping them my card, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Until magic is illegal, like I will use it for what I can, because the scale is tilted a little bit, and there are people who get convicted of things, you know, and they should be convicted of much more than they are. And you know, one way to handle that is magically. So yeah. I love that approach too, just about like maintaining a balance, and not being afraid to, you know, like step in like whenever you need to.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's not my job to fix everyone's problems, but
Yes.
but it's still a good like it's a when you're out in the community, especially physically, you are there for a purpose, and it's like a little ridiculous to be there like, oh, I'm not here to educate anyone. Like, yeah, you kind of are. Like, you're there. It's a place where a lot of people come with a lot of questions, and you're out and about being visible. So you're making yourself open to some scrutiny or questions. Or I was
Right.
shadowing a tour, in town the other day, and it's supposed to be a Q&A, depending on the tour guide, it depends. But and one guest was just like asking me if my craft conflicted with my religion. And I said, no, not at all. But he was assuming I was Catholic because I mentioned my ancestors were.
I
And I was like,
see.
okay, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't conflict if I was Catholic neither, but like, they were not ready for that. So I'll just keep that to myself.
Yeah. And so how is magic generally viewed in your area then? Like, is it accepted or?
I think what the problem with my area is that the witchcraft world is so insular and so interconnected and so present that a lot of us forget that the rest of Salem doesn't fucking know what we're doing. They're all like, there's these idiots in costumes and like tarot cards and whatever. Like they have no idea what the fuck we're up to. The city has some idea. We have licensure for readers and things like that, although it's more of a precaution against blatant, like aggressive scams. So it's like we're not really taken that seriously, although we gotta give certain witches certain credits where they've exceeded into the public eye. So there's some awareness out here, and a lot of people come down here because they're curious. But there's also people who've lived here their entire lives and have no idea
That's
that
amazing.
witchcraft is
That's
real. Yeah.
remarkable to me.
So
But some people are
it's so
practicing it all the
bizarre.
time
Yeah.
without realizing it at all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, and it's like because they hear witchcraft and they're thinking of the historical events. They don't think of
Mhm.
the practice that is living and breathing now. So
Yeah, it's amazing how surprised people are when they see me wearing all black and like they see like my gauges or whatever, or they hear me talking about like adversarial currents, and then they realize that I also like do counseling and I'm an instructor and I also like do healing like for people. That it blows their mind and it's like why does it have to be either or? Like for some people, like the middle path is like using demons to heal people.
yeah, like, and I see it as like, if this path has taught me anything, if coming to this path has taught me anything, after trying to present all this balance by other people's standards, right? Like being, oh, I'm light and dark and all this stuff. But really finding that like what energies and what currents have actually healed me and actually gotten me results
Yes.
and where I'm actually thriving. And I never thought I would reach such points in my skills as a witch ever, and that was my awareness. I still had this awareness of some incredible things that Wiccan high priestesses can do that are mind-blowing. And I was like, I'll never be able to do any of that shit. The right hand path makes you believe you have to go join a coven and do all this shit.
Uh-huh.
But like when I got into, a little bit darker work, when I got deeper with Lilith, and then from there it all sort of spiraled, like my shit was hitting different. Like it was just hitting different. It was making sense. Like I was seeing results that were perhaps because they were so fast, more chaotic,
Uh-huh.
and more blatant, and clearly not a coincidence anymore.
Uh-huh.
So things were shifting, and it was weird to me how many people were. Anytime I talked about it, were like it didn't depend. Excuse me. It would just be like other witches a lot of the time who were trying to steer me away from
Hmm.
like that side of things because they had
Interesting.
this idea like, oh, you're just like this young girl. I think it's because I was alternative for the most part. They were like, oh, she's goth, so she's trying to be Nancy and be edgy and shit. I was like, nah, I just like want books about the dark goddess, please. Like I was just like,
Yeah.
I just want like books like that so I can meditate on her. It'd be cool.
Mhm.
I'm not really interested in this like fucking patriarchal ass triple goddess you got
Yeah.
going on right now. Respect to her, love her, but not my archetype. Thank you. Like,
Yeah, sometimes it's not just about being dark or making a statement. Sometimes just different currents resonate more deeply with some of us, and
yeah,
that's all it is. It's not that, oh, I'm trying to be this or that. It's like you have your things and I have mine.
exactly. And it's like, if we're in this multiverse and we all have different roles to play, like maybe mind yours, like mind yours and fulfill yours. I think I fulfill mine fairly well. I really love uh, logically tormenting Christians once in a while, and they inflict it upon themselves. It's entertaining, but I can only kill so many brain cells at once just
Yeah,
interacting.
it's true.
So I usually focus on my love for Satan more or less. So,
Mhm.
but we all have different roles to play.
Yeah, we do. And some people should spend less time assuming that like their role is everybody else's role, or everybody else's role should be like their role. So you mentioned cannabis. How much have drugs played a part in your healing and in your like enlightenment?
So I don't have a lot of experience with a lot of different drugs. I've mostly just used cannabis. I've had like ritual wine and things like that, and um I've also used like, I think it was mugwort, wormwood, things like that, on and off. I'm looking to experiment with psilocybin. It is decriminalized where I am, which is pretty cool.
Excellent.
Um, yeah, and I'm excited. So that's more recent in my practice. I think I more or less, I don't do a lot of ceremonial things with the drug before I take it. I don't. There have been times where I've kind of tried to do it, but it almost felt weird to me. It felt like over
Yeah.
venerating the drug itself,
Yeah,
or
like
whatever.
putting it on a pedestal.
Anything more
Yeah.
than like awakening the herb for the purpose. It seemed
Mhm.
like it was taking attention away from what I wanted it to be. But
Mhm.
cannabis radically changed my mental health in general, and it was starting to change like the way I was expanding my creativity. And I just found, I was like, yeah, it just naturally is going to glob into my spirituality. And it was around that time that I was finding like stoner doom metal,
I love it.
and
I
like
love it.
a lot of that has satanic themes because they're inspired by the Reefer Madness Satanic Panic kind
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
thing going on. So a lot of it's tongue in cheek, but when you're really high and you're in a spiritual state and you see things in this multi-dimensional way, you start to like, motorcycle going by, sorry. You start to see like you see different ways to interpret art, and you sort of like give a story to what you're
Uh-huh.
listening to, and you sort of like see this other meaning for you that that if you describe to people, you'd sound like a crazy ass stoner. You're just like, no one's gonna take me seriously as I interpret this beautiful poetry coming through my speakers. Like, so you're just sort of like absorbing. It made me much more receptive, and it helped me work through my emotions in a more positive way. I've always been sort of like a chronically depressed person,
Mhm.
and although I'd probably still say like, yeah, I probably still have depression,
Mhm.
cannabis helped me sort of like shift my neuro patterns to think more positively about things, and just sort of like logic myself into positivity instead of logicking myself into the most miserable conclusion I possibly could come to. So it helps shift me in that way, and I think it's just become very sacred to me in a lot of my practice. Lately I've sort of taken a break from involving it as much because I'm trying to get back into just organically focusing. But it's a wonderful medicine. Definitely
Absolutely.
recommend.
I absolutely I that definitely resonates with me. I know for me, I started using cannabis very young. I use it sparingly now, but I used to use it when I was pretty young because I just had crazy things going on in my mind. And it was the first time I ever tried cannabis. it like allowed me to step outside of my normal mindset. And it's like I could see my thoughts going by. And I was like, why am I thinking those? Like those aren't even useful. Like,
Yeah.
and wait, that's a good one. Like I'll keep that one. And I like it's a process now. I mentioned I like alliteration. It's a process now that I call fertilizing the flowers and whacking the weeds. Because like as you like deny these negative, like intrusive thoughts, at like and you accept the ones that are positive, like you create a habit of doing that. Like whatever you practice, like you're getting better at, like all the time. So cannabis definitely helped me a lot with that. Other drugs have as well, like psilocybin. I microdose psilocybin now, and it's done a lot of the same thing. It's helped me like just take a step back, and like it's almost like I realize even more that like I'm in like a machine or like a matrix thing, and it's like I can hack into the console more deeply. I
Yeah.
don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah, I think I've always enjoyed the different ways I've used like wormwood and mugwort.
Those are good
And
ones.
I remember like I was fiending one day and I decided to like roll a joint that had,
Oh wow.
cannabis, mugwort, something else in there, and then I think Mullen. And I
Uh-huh.
rolled that all together and I was like, I had parked my car wherever I needed to park my car because it was like street cleaning. And I see it's the full moon. I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna have my joint, completely forgetting that I had mixed things other than weed in there. And I'm walking in the dark, like I'm walking by the water. If you visit Salem, you'll see the Friendship. I walked by that because I was pulled into the tide. I was like, I'm gonna go look at the tide. I can feel the moon moving the tide. Why can I feel the moon moving the tide so clearly? And I and I stood there and like the creaking on the ship just sounded so eerie when you're like that high. Like
I
it sounds
bet.
so
Yeah.
eerie. And it sounds like people moaning and wailing. And I was like, aware of these dual realities I was having. I was aware of this like paranoid reality where there are ghosts and they are doing these things. And I was aware also of this like very mundane reality of it not happening at all. And I was like, huh, oh, that's right. I took drugs. Okay. And I just like continued. I just like continued home and I was seeing shadow people
I
and like,
bet.
I was just like, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. Like this is terrifying. This is fun. Like I love this. Like I don't know. It's like the chaos magician, the psychonaut in me. My own mind was so fucked up before I did drugs, like ever. Like because I only used cannabis, I think mostly like the end of college. And
Uh-huh.
I had a few like fucked up greenouts in college, so like I avoided cannabis for a while. And then like I really got into cannabis sometime after I moved to Salem. It was like it switched on a dime for me and it was like perfect for me. Um so like I don't know, but I like so previously to that, all of my visions, all of my stuff was me like diving into my really fucked up brain just on my own, like through meditation. So I had
Yeah.
seen a lot of the gunk in there and I'd cleaned it all, a lot of it out or made my peace with it. So by the time I was like using drugs, like I wasn't really shocked by anything I saw. I was like, yeah,
I was
there
gonna
it is.
ask how much of it. Well, one, I was gonna say I think you're gonna handle mushrooms just fine, and two, I was
But
going
be
to ask
surprised. You never know.
that. Well, that's true, but I attribute a lot of that to shadow work, and I was wondering how much of you being able to handle that do you attribute to being aware of your own demons, so to speak, and having contractualized them, I guess, is one manner of speaking. How much of it do you contribute to like shadow work, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I guess like I guess this is before like shadow work was really a term,
Sure.
out there for me to understand. The closest term I had was like self-help, but it was to me it was just like my spiritual practice. There was these
Hmm.
things arising out of me that I had no other place or room to express. I began with an altar literally in a closet. And
Uh-huh.
I hid it there for a long time. It was discovered. I was warned it would be discovered. Literally, my goddess warned me, but I was not at a place to trust my own intuition at the
You didn't
time.
listen.
But I did partially listen. I took what was most important with me, that day. So everything else was gone, but I had the most important things. This stone that I still have that's
Oh wow.
a pentagram that I picked out when I was like 2 years old for some
Oh
reason.
wow, that's
Um,
beautiful.
Yeah, I've had this stone as like when I was a little kid, I had like a rock collection.
Uh-huh. Me too.
And
I have as
this was
well.
the key component in the rock collection. And I remember I actually do have the memory of picking this the fuck out. I could barely talk. We were somewhere where there was a gift shop and they had like those bowls full of those like the animals. Like I recently got like a scorpion one, you know, like
Very
the
cool.
animals carved into the rocks. And I was looking through them and I was a big animal kid, but I was like, none of these fucking animals for me. None of these fucking animals for me. Where is
I
it?
want a pentagram.
Where is
Yeah.
it? I was like really thinking like, where is it? And I like find the star and this, you couldn't see a pentagram anywhere, you
Mhm.
know, out in like, there's no way my little eyeballs ever saw a pentagram. But I was like, this is it. And I never
This one.
asked for anything from my mother, but I demanded that. I demanded my stone. I got my stone. And like, it was so weird because even the first Wiccan books I was reading did not display pentagrams. Like, pentagrams were seen as so evil, you know, and like just post 90s, right? Like, pentagrams were
Mhm.
seen like so evil and like so negative. The best like association people have was like the craft, you know, and that wasn't,
Yeah.
you know, good. So like, literally a lot of the books held off on showing you the pentagram until
Uh-huh.
like way later. And so I remember coming across it kind of in the middle of the book and I was like, the fuck? And I like whipped out my old little rock collection that was like stashed away. And I was like, the fuck, I picked this out like as a kid. And it's weirder to me too, because when I was Wiccan, I was like, I don't know why as a kid I held it. I held it so that it would point down.
Uh-huh. You know.
Now I
Yeah.
know, but I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know why I held it like I would like point down because when I was Wiccan, I was like, point it up, you know. So I don't know. I fully believe like in past lives I was practicing something or other.
It's awesome that you
You know,
still have that stone. I think that's awesome. I don't have anything from my original practice. I think my first altar was like an Altoids box in my closet. That
I
was
have
just
like
like a
I still
little.
have my little Altoids box
You,
full of
you had
stuff.
the same
Yeah.
thing. That's awesome. That's so 90s, or like I guess it was 2000s back then. But yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, you still have that stone, and like,
I
so do
think
you
I
have
have.
any other?
You know why? And I think I know why I have this. And literally because you have to understand, even though I was a child, I was like really witchy. Around the age of like 10 to 13, just before I got into it, I was this hardcore atheist. I was like, none of
So
that
was I.
shit's real. You know, I got into Wicca for the nature shit and the gender equality. I didn't
Yeah,
fucking care about witchcraft. I was like, that's just not real. Like, it's just
interesting.
spicy psychology. Ugh.
Spicy
And
psychology. I love
I for real think that my past life, like, or my consciousness before this life was like, I know me,
it.
I know my ass, and I'm gonna be a Virgo in this next life. Okay, she's gonna need proof. Like myself is gonna need proof for me, like, or we're gonna waste a lot of time. So let's just let's just get a little token of proof, you know.
That's
And then
so
I'll
you're.
tell my consciousness where I'm leaving it, so I'll go find it. And like,
I'm parking it right here. So you have a scorpion stone. So part of me assumed that you might be Scorpio. So does the scorpion just relate to death and transformation for you? Is there another reason that
I
you chose a
actually got that
scorpion?
stone during a client working with Belial.
Okay,
So it was like I needed hematite, and I was just looking for hematite, and
that's
I
a good
found
one.
a hematite with a scorpion on it, and I was like, perfect.
Very cool.
It was the gold was also perfect for that spell as well.
That's so. What are some things that you either don't agree with and practice, or have yet to try and practice? Some of your least favorite things to do?
Oh, I'm overcasting circles. Like I'm not about it.
Is there such a thing as overcasting a circle, though?
Uh,
Oh,
like
you're
I mean,
saying
I'm
you're
done with
you're
it.
over it. You're saying you're over it. I thought you
Yeah, I'm
meant you
over it.
overcast. I see what you're
Yeah,
saying.
like sorry, I'm gay. I don't know how to talk. But like but like I did it for a while. I never really committed to casting circles that
So
frequently. Yeah.
what is casting a circle for you? Like, what does that entail that you're so over it?
I mean, I'm flexible on the structure of what a circle would be. I think like
Okay,
there's,
maybe.
you
Okay.
know, the closest thing that I might do is similar to how traditional witches like lay a compass, although I do it a little differently. I find that creating a barrier like that around yourself interrupts a lot of subtle energies that
I can see
people
that.
forget about and that are there long before we were.
Mhm.
I live in a city, I live in a condensed building, long before even, you know, long before the Puritans were here, there were other people here, and before these people, there was wildlife here. And so there's a lot of, dead I'm sitting on
Mhm.
top of, and there's a lot of fae that pass through here. There's a lot of things moving around. So I find that when you create a block anywhere, especially in a high vibrational, high magic activity place like where I am, a lot of things kind of build up like a dam around it, and they're pissed.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
and then when you take that down, they're all there waiting for you, and that's been my experience over and over again with circles, is that it
Okay.
seemed to interrupt the energy. And I felt that like I was blocking out the things, consequently, somehow blocking out the things I wanted to call in. Um, I don't know if this is just me, but I don't have a lot of magical attacks. I don't have a lot of like things coming at me. I am protected, but it took me a long time to actually do like active protections. And I think that's because like I just had really good deity relationships, and I just
Uh-huh.
never needed to do a lot of protection work because I just simply won the favor of a lot of deities through time, through communication, through like offerings without asking for anything really. Just because I love spending time with them. So they just wanted to protect me, and I think I took that for granted a lot of the time.
Mhm.
I definitely take Satan's protection for granted sometimes, because I would go into haunted houses and they wouldn't be haunted anymore. They just nothing would be there, and I didn't know why. I was like,
Clear
it
it
took
out.
me a long time, and I'm still like, for me now, like I can't deal when people like talk to me about mediumship or whatever, but I'm only now like warming up to the idea of communicating with the dead. I've been very like against it for a long time. Because I was just like, why? Like, dead people are either reincarnated or gone or whatever. Like, why conjure them up? Why, open the
Mhm.
wound of grief? Or maybe you're just projecting onto someone who never changed and you wanted them to change. So, I always avoided that kind of thing. But I'm gently kind of dipping my toe into necromancy, and I'm just sort of like feeling the energy of the dead. And as I feel that, I think I have more respect for how I lay myself down, even magically, because I feel like casting a circle, especially depending on where you do it, it's this very like colonizer mindset of like, this is my space now and nothing else can get in. And it's like, well, where the fuck did you come from? Right. So,
Uh-huh.
whereas what I do instead now is similar to laying a compass, where I may be in motion, I may not be, where I am opening a portal. And Clifothic magic is fucking fun to do that with. So like
I love it.
and the best place to do that is in nature, because the portal is all around you, all the elements at your disposal, all your
Mhm.
tools. You don't really need a lot of things you would need for indoor work. Um, all this ceremonial stuff, like most I take with me in the woods might be my cauldron and my knife. Like, don't really need
Mhm.
anything but a fire to work out there. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I feel it's weird to cast a circle when you're in nature. Um, like you're keeping out all of the things that can help you do work. So, you know, there's definitely ways to protect yourself. There's definitely things you can do. But for me, like I find that I like the flow of energy. I like things to be able to pass by me without a problem. Um, I can be loud with my energy, or I can be undetected. It depends on what I want to do. So that's me. I've definitely felt powerful circles. Like the first few circles I've casted, I could feel like power, and I noticed it. But honestly, it became like a waste of time over time, and I was like, I don't know, I don't think I need to cast a circle for this tiny ass spell, really. Come on. Like, because every book back then was like, you can cast a
Yeah.
circle for
Yeah. Yeah.
everything you do all the time. Like, I have to get the salt and the water and the incense and I mostly just did it with my hand, and I would do the pentagrams, but even then they could get complicated with the fucking elemental pentagrams and which one was the invoking that element that direction that way. And I was like, this all comes from Freemasonry. This isn't even witchcraft. Why am I learning this? Like, I'm not even interested. So it was kind of
I get
validating
it.
for me. When I got more into like traditional witchcraft, I saw how much of Wicca was like Freemasonry. I was like, oh, that's why I didn't care about it. Like, it's just not my vibe. It's not my thing.
I get that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we discussed that, because casting circles means different things for different people. Having practiced a relatively long time myself, when I cast a circle, it's usually for one of two things. It's generally either if I feel something really heavy, like a really heavy spiritual pressure, like I'll normally like push back to like just the extent of like where I feel like my aura is. Or I'll do it and for concentration. So like I don't see circles as protective, because like for me, if something wants to get in your circle, like it's going to get in your circle. I have a friend who's extremely clairvoyant and clairsentient, and she can actually astral project to like people and feel and like get inside their auras and read them and stuff, which is pretty cool. And like basically I'm convinced after that like if something wants to get in your circle, like it's going to get in your circle. So I think about it like a point of concentration. And for me, like I literally just throw up like an astral and etheric circle around myself. Like I don't break out the salt, I don't break out the fucking
That's
runes and shit.
typically what
Like
I protect with, is something like that.
a
Or
gesture and an astral conjuring. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was in it's interesting, we're talking about like protection and being in spaces, and I mentioned the dead earlier. I was in a space where like it was not a satanic family space at all, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn from this space, and I was invited, so I went, and with Satan's permission. And I remember, the educator there just stopped in the middle of it and looked at me and was like she hadn't really looked at me the entire time. That's what I noticed about people
Uh-huh.
on the right hand path. They'll
Uh-huh.
deliberately not look at me, for a while, and then they like she reached a point where she wanted to acknowledge something, and I was like, okay.
Uh-huh.
And she was like, you have like a funky like protection thing going on, and I was like, oh yeah. She's like, what's that? Because they had all been talking about the dead and calling them dead demons this entire time. And I said, it's real demons. I just laid out like, it's real demons. Like, and she was like, cool. Like, I was like, yeah, thank you. I was like, yeah, like be mindful with your words, everybody. Like, just, you don't know what you're looking at. I asked her later, after the event, like, I was like, what does it look like? I was curious, because I, to be honest, like, you say I'm like psychic and stuff. No, I'm like oblivious all the time. I just have ADHD and I'm oblivious, and I just plow through things. Like the haunted house shit, I would just go in there. Everything's gone because I'm there. But I was like, so what does it look like? Because I had no idea what the fuck it was to look like. All I knew was I had asked a certain spirit to watch over me, because Satan said, bring him with you. And she was like, I don't know. It was a very nonchalant, like, it's there. Don't explore it any further. I'm like, oh, it sounds like him.
That's about right. Yeah.
Like, yeah, for your safety, don't. Like, I was like, I'm satisfied with that answer. Thank you. Like,
That's a good one. I always love hearing how people describe my different servitors. I do a lot with like thought forms and servitors and stuff, and sometimes I'll have people tell me that they're like, you have something that's like it's wearing a black robe. The last thing that somebody told me was, you have a skeleton and a black robe inside your circle. And I'm like, uh-huh. And they're like, okay, just so you know. I'm like, yeah, it's all good. He's like basically a mentor. And they're like, okay, thanks for letting me
are
know.
we talking the
Like,
same? Yeah, I literally, I had the same. I think I had the same guy with me, and they're like, I was like, I really like. I know when I learned they couldn't, you can't see him. I was like, yeah, this is probably for the best. Like, it's probably for the best. Yeah, it's like some people work with things that, like, if you're not culturally aware, people might think it's negative. Like if
uh-huh.
someone had never seen La Santa Muerte before, Like,
Mhm.
they might not know what to do with if they did. And that's what I find so frustrating about all these like new age kind of psychics and
Mhm.
mediums and people who tell people what they are
Mhm.
and discern to them what they are. Cause like, if I don't know what I'm looking at, all I do is describe what I'm looking at. And I'm like, does that make sense? Like, that's all I say. I'm like, does that make sense? I don't know what the fuck that is. Like,
Uh-huh.
you explain that to me. You're just having me look. I'm the observer here. I'm not the interpreter. I'm not here to judge what it is. I'm not here to like be your guru for a minute. You're not paying me enough for that. Like, I'm not going to do all that. I made the mistake in the past of doing something that's not for me, which would be like the demon identification readings or things like that.
Mhm.
Me, like when someone asked me to do that, I was like, oh, okay, I have to do a whole ritual where I summon this demon that's been talking to you. Whereas
Mhm.
everybody else on TikTok or whatever was just like pulling cards. So and like picking a random demon deck and like picking a card and be like, that's the demon. Like that's what everyone else was doing. But I was like, oh no, I'm gonna find out. Like, hold on. Like,
Let's really figure
like
this
I
out.
did.
Yeah.
Like, hold on, let me find out.
I
And
love
as
it.
I found out I was more clairvoyant than I, initially thought because I was scrying to go look. And like I didn't and I didn't ever I didn't even make any definitive, claims. I was like, I have a feeling based on this
Mhm.
information and based on like how I've narrowed it down to this, it's likely that it is this spirit. If you can confirm that, go confirm or debunk it, because it is your practice and it is your
Mhm.
relationship. And I'm just hoping that I did get the right frequency of what's been tuning into you. We get back to your own practice. I think a lot of people with the internet now and everything, like they want their favorite influencer to like deliver them a spiritual message, and I think that's so dangerous. You know what I
That's a
mean? Like,
trap.
I think that's so dangerous. And I'm like, what made me, if you like me and you like my content, you like what my experiences that I'm sharing, and you want to have anything like it, you can't do it by copying me. Okay, like you won't be able to have it if you're focused on copying me or you're focused on me doing it for you.
Mhm.
And any healthy spiritual practitioner, any spiritual practitioner that's offering services and wants you to do well and actually does their job, they don't want you coming back once a month. Okay. Like, I don't want people coming back to me once a month for a reading or a routine working. If you're coming to me for something different, fine, but don't come to me with the same issue over and over again. I know you're not listening to me. I don't care. Like, I'm not like, I don't care how much money you want to pay me. Like, if I don't feel listened to, I'm not going to do this shit.
I've lost friends over that shit. Yeah, I get it. I just had to say the other day, like, if if somebody steps on a rock every single day and they say ow, and like I try to tell them to wear shoes outside, and then they come back to the next day and they step on a rock and they say ow, I'm like, I don't want to hear it anymore. Like, yeah, like after so long, I try to teach people how to read as I'm doing readings for them. Every single card that I pull, I explain, this is this card, this is what it means, this is why it means that to me, and here's what it means for you. And I think some people just like to have the readings done, which is cool. But whenever it's like for every little thing, it's like, well, what do I do now? Well, what do I do now? It's like, okay, you need to take a step back. Like, this is just, for me, the tarot is like a massive Rorschach blot test. And it's like the 78 cups for you to like pour your subconscious into, to read it and make it more visible, and like to rend the veil essentially.
Yeah, like tarot's where I really started opening up. Like, my logical
Mhm.
mind started opening up to all the woo woo stuff. Like, because I was like,
Sure.
I don't know, I can definitely get behind like interpreting symbols and things like that. And I was just always fascinated by how, like, if I didn't like the answer and I shuffled, I would get the same cards. It's kind of like, I'm like, what the hell? I've switched decks, get the same cards. Like, I was like, there's something to this. But
Yeah.
I resonate with that. Like, and every, there are some readings that the information is coming so fast I can't explain how I'm getting it all the time.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
am touching every card. Like, I'm very like, I'm the tap the card with the nails
Yeah.
bitch. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
this one and this one, and then I see over here. And but the way I read, I no longer use spreads really. I rarely use spreads.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
get
know
that.
why. I've just sort of started. It's sort of more like a mosaic to me now. I just sort of see how the images
I
interact with
love
each
that.
other,
Yeah,
and
like a
like I just sort of,
tapestry or something. Yeah.
yeah. and one card can say more than one thing in the same
Yes.
reading to me as I'm looking at it, as the images, like, and now that I kind of scry on cards, sometimes they move, sometimes there's things I see on the card that's not printed on the
Yeah.
card.
Oh
That's
yeah.
happened to me a few times, and I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, I was pointing to a guitar that didn't exist to these people. Like, I was like, the guitar right there, like, just not in the card. I was like, okay, now I have to explain to people that sometimes I see things in the cards that are not printed on the cards because I'm scrying,
Uh-huh.
or this or that. So, but yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I'll usually typically go through like the numerology and the element. That's like the fastest way I can like say what I'm saying. Or the astrological correspondences through tarot is like a fast way I can say it. So I'm like, oh, you have the strength card, it's ruled by Leo, this and that's going on,
Okay.
whatever. I don't like when I see like new agers be like, oh, it's this and it's Sagittarius energy because we have temperance, and it's like, this person's not a Sagittarius because there's temperance. Like, they like,
Uh-huh.
maybe they just need the temperance card. So I think like tarot is fascinating because it's something you can show people. That's something I loved about it. I'm like, it's something I can show people and they can learn it themselves, and they know I'm not bullshitting them.
Yeah.
Like, they know I'm not just bullshitting them because I can show them stuff, and I let people take pictures of my readings like after,
I
if
do
it's
too.
in person,
Yeah.
because I'm like, first of all, I want you to remember what the hell I said, and any
Mhm.
of these images that could like conjure up that memory of what the fuck I said would
Yeah.
help you,
I
if I didn't tell
record
you to
some of my
record it.
readings on Zoom and then I send them to my clients. That way they can, and I email them. That way they can read it throughout the week and see it over and over and over.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people forget what I'm saying as I'm saying it. So, because I just start going whenever I'm reading. So I'll record it and
I think
send
I
it to
should do
them.
that in my live readings. Because I used to just do pre-recorded readings, which was
Mhm.
helpful for me to just develop my skills over time, get really good. Because when I wasn't focused on someone's reaction or anything to me reading, and I sort of had just this empty void to like read into, um, I found that I was more accurate when I wasn't like desperately trying to be like, oh, was that resonating with them, or is that
Yeah.
making sense to them?
Uh-huh.
So I was just like, I had to just go through it, and then they would message me later and be like, oh my God, you saw this and you saw
Spot on.
that, and like, this made me like open up emotionally, this made me cry in a good way, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, like, I had not, like, sometimes I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah, you just have to go with it though. And then because like I used to doubt that too. I'm like, this has nothing to do with with what's going on in the person's life right now. And then I get that voice that's like, not yet. And I'm like, oh yeah, duh, I'm being too intellectual about it. Like I need to just say what I'm feeling and
Yeah.
translate it, and it comes true. Like whether it's NLP or whether it's, seeing
I
into the
think,
future or
I
a
think it's
mix.
just those patterns in this universe, right? Like,
Right.
the Fibonacci numbers, they just repeat over and over again. I think there's something to that in consciousness. I think there's something to like how the the main ways that collective consciousness repeats its mistakes. I think there is
Huh.
something to greater patterns that are intangible. And I think art, which tarot is 78 or more pieces of art smashed together in these
Love it.
powerful archetypes that have been seen for like at least like, over 100 years. And yeah, it was a playing card game, but now it's, this
It's
thing
so
people
much
use in
more.
Kabbalistic fucking
I
practices
was
and
gonna
shit.
ask, you mentioned numerology and elements. Do you use Kabbalah in your interpretation of tarot? I certainly do.
Um, I think when I first got into tarot, I had like my second like tarot book ever. My second deck was the Vampire Tarot, and that
Interesting.
book uses a lot of like the Kabbalistic like correspondences, and that was all just like sort of gibberish to me at the time. It was very intimidating, and I kind of put it off for a while. But as I got into my Clefothic studies,
Mm.
like I started to be more interested in how tarot and Kabbalah fit together again. But I think I only really started to seriously look at that as I'm looking at the tunnels of Set. So like, which is something that I'm looking into more now, and I'm just like, oh yeah, like there's 22 main paths and there's 22 arcana, and like,
Mm.
let's like delve into that and add another layer onto what I understand. But the astrology, I've been doing that for a while in my tarot decks. I have some tarot decks that like have the astrology sort of hidden in the artwork that can kind of remind you, and then I have decks that like don't. The major arcana astrology is really easy for me to remember. It's the minor arcana, and this past moon in Aquarius, I was wondering what card was moon in Aquarius, and it is the Seven of Swords. So I was like, interesting.
I was just talking about that card yesterday. That's funny. The guy's like running off with all of the swords. That's the deception card. That's hilarious.
Yes.
I love that. So I definitely want to hear more about your experience with the Cliffoth and the Tunnels of Set. Is that something you'd be willing to talk about?
I don't have much to say about the Tunnels of Set as of late, so I'll be very, very boring answers to those questions. But the Cliffoth, sure, yeah, let's talk about the Cliffoth.
Okay, so for me, it's been very it's subjective, but in a way that is like comprehensive. And it's something that my associates and I all seem to agree upon. Like, for instance, the same things that happen for one of us in Golakab tend to happen for another. The same things that happen in Arab Zarak tend to happen in another. Slightly different variations of it. Have your experiences been pretty par for the course, or have you had any like abnormalities in your experience in the Cliffoth that you can describe? I know it's all abnormal, but
I'm trying to remember like rapidly what I did and did not share in my series, because like so it was all encompassing for me. Like my
Mhm.
entire initiation, like perhaps okay, so like it was more subtle for me around like Nihimith to Gamaliel. Like I was like, yeah, okay, this is like what I'm expecting. And then Samael's when shit got kind of cool, kind of
Sure,
interesting. I
sure.
started
A
to see
drama
like
lecture.
I started to like, yeah, and I was having fun with him. And I was starting to see how like things were manifesting around me. And it started with just like an album cover, no
Oh.
big deal. And I was like, okay, like, and then Aram Zarak happened and shit hit the fan, and I was just like, um, I mean, for real, like I would be lying if I said I avoided psychosis the entire time. Like that's not true. Like there's like times I was in prolonged like psychosis, and I was able to like perceive so many layers of reality at once, and it
Uh-huh.
was just very overwhelming and very like emotionally and like spiritually involved. And I had a lot of chaotic events that like I still would have to listen back on my wild manic voice memos to understand, like to be like, oh yeah, that was when I was just
I love the voice memo idea. I would wake up in the middle of the night with dreams and throw on my voice memo and be like, dream about spiders crawling out of my pores on my scalp. And then like fall back asleep, and then I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh yeah, spiders relate to this sphere or whatever.
there'd be like weird shit that just seems like if you're not like, just for example, like there are crows all the time, but of course, when I'm in a Rob's Rock, all the
Ravens,
crows are
crows.
by my
Yeah,
front door. Like
of
all of
course.
them are by my front door. Like it was just the animals I was seeing, the weather patterns, even sometimes
Mhm.
the big astrological events were corresponding a lot with
They
like the
always do.
things I was going through. And so I was feeling it so intensely, and I was like, okay, this is a wild ride. And I just had no, I remember someone talking to me about like the gaps in between the shells, and I was like, there ain't no gap for me. I'm as soon as I'm done with one, they shove me in the next one. I don't even know, like, and I didn't memorize all like 11 of these like processes at all. Like I was just like, okay,
It was
let's
just
go with
you
this.
triggered a response in your consciousness and it just started going.
It just started going, and it is so cool looking back on that, like, because I kind of got through it so fast because I was intending to just slowly and steadily, like, research the Cliffa, do the exercise, da 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 da, like, because I learned best through doing things, and I was like, that seems like the best way, and it just seemed like I was forced into the experience. Yes, I had like some resources to be like guidelines, sort of,
Right.
not as many as I do now, but it was just sort of like shoving me into the experience. And I look back and I read back on those Cliffoth, and I'm like, yeah, I see how that manifested for me. I see how these experiences like fit that archetype or fit that energy, that like
Mhm.
frequency. Um, and what I found really interesting was like I understood the tree of life more. I understood the Sephiroth more,
Absolutely.
because like the Sephiroth had like made no sense to me until I looked at the Cliffoth, and I was like, now it makes sense to me. And I see how like the Cliffoth themselves, like conceptually anyway, contain all that the Sephiroth are and more. Like, because in order to be the shadow of something, you already know what the light is. It already like illuminates and gives dimension to what that
Mhm.
light is. If the light is just blinding you, there's nothing to perceive. So like it's that shadow that gives it form, it gives it shape. So it's like I think of like the Sephiroth as like their raw energy, and the Cliffoth are like this form to contain it in. They're
Mhm.
cells to
Yeah, a
contain
shell or a
something in.
husk. Yeah.
Yeah. And because they are now like empty or whatever, like you are what it's
Yes.
containing. And it
Love it.
comes back to my like conceptualizing of the black flame, where it's a void within self. And when you perceive any little bit of you in that void, it's it's all that is there. So in that cliff, now you are emanating that energy the way it manifests from within you. It's like a fire. You're fueling that fire with yourself. So you're
Yeah.
this kindling for this black flame to be like, okay, now the fire is gonna like do this, and the smoke is gonna be like that because we have this fuel, and it's gonna burn
Mhm.
for this long. And so like, I had planned on doing like a month on each cliffa evenly, and that's like not what happened. Not what happened, but I finished around 11 months, which is kind of cool.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah, I'm counting Doff as a cliffa. I know not everyone
I
does,
I
but
I do as well.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm currently going through my third time right now. I went through a second time just to see like if there was anything else there. And then I had this realization about like Absolute Bria, Yetzirah, and Asaya. And I was like, whoa, like I have to go through it at least 4 times. So like I'm currently going through Golak. I'm on my last night of Golakab of Bria. And it's funny that you mentioned the like the synchronicities that occur, because I started this process a long time ago and then stopped and then started it again recently, not considering any astrological correspondences. And one of the many that happened was recently, and I ended up starting Golakab, and the first night was a blood moon. This was like a week ago. First night was a blood moon, and it was on a Tuesday, which relates to Mars, which relates to Gebra. So it was just like, it's like, man, like my consciousness, my subconscious knew exactly when to start all of this and knew when to do what. And like, it's just crazy, like how tapped in that we can be, especially when we have knowledge of the different levels of our being. And I feel like that's what the Cliffoth and the tunnels are, is degrees of our shadow. Is that sort of what you found as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like these multi dimensions of shadow, but not just like it's not just like a personal shadow, is it? It's like the shadow of my entire reality. It's like the shadow of like
Mhm.
everything I've been
Yes.
perceiving and
Yeah,
everything I've been
exactly.
interacting with. And so like it and like it's funny you say like about, because it was my first time going through that I was documenting. And I was it was weird because I was thinking to myself, I'm like, should I go through again? Like I feel like I should go through again. and just because there's more for me to do. And I've been sort of working in different Cliffoth at different times, because the spirit has
Yeah,
been guiding
that's
me.
how
But
it
I'm like,
goes.
no,
Yeah.
I feel like I need to like go through the process again. And because I work through Thaumiel, I'm seeing now more and more. I have these mental maps of
Hmm.
these physical places that are my portals
Hmm.
to the different Cliffoth. And so to me, there's a star, and I'll keep it to myself, but I've mentioned it maybe once before. There's a star that I feel is a manifestation in this universe of Thaumiel. And so I was like meditating with that, and I was like in that cliff, I was just vibing, and it sort of just, because it's an eclipsing binary of a star, it sort of like opened up like this direct line back to Behemoth. And I was like, oh,
Amazing.
oh, what's going on? Like, let's look at that. So it's just like, and it was around this time that I was getting into like, I think it was around the time that I was initiating through Gakshaba that I was. getting into stellar magic.
I love it.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's such a difficult topic to research when you're broke. Oh my God.
You just have to trust your intuition and dive in.
Well, I got a book that I do love. This book gets a lot of criticism, I think, mostly from Solomonic magicians, just from like they don't like admitting that like that demons are pagan. I'm sorry, like demons are originally pagan. Like I'm sorry, most of them don't come from your tradition originally, but like it's called Stellus Daemonum, and it looks into like the all the possible like histories or correlations that they could be the same spirit or the same entity, and looking at like what constellations, stars specifically, it would make sense for them to associate with. And you kind of have to have some knowledge of elective astrology to understand it. That's a piece I was missing as I was first reading it. I was like, what the fuck is all this? And so I'm diving deeper into talismanic elective astrology.
Okay.
And most of that you can find the planetary stuff fairly easily. It's the stellar stuff that's more complex, and a lot of people don't tell you about it because they don't want you to know, and
It's a
especially
little more
not
hushed.
big
Yeah.
stars, which is the primary kind of star I want to work with. So there's
Yeah.
all these layers to learning about that, and I think maybe I'm supposed to go through the Qliphoth and map it out, like a constellation, map it out in the
That's
sky.
beautiful.
Yeah, so that's a process, and I at least have Thaumiel figured out, but I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do with everything else.
That's very interesting. I love that. There's a so-called malefic star that is a binary star that I work with as well, that I have had dreams about for a very long time, and was felt to call to work with it. And it's a very important one. It's a very powerful one. I love the idea of talismanic magic as well. I love the idea. You mentioned hands-on tactile magic, and I love making talismans and like imbuing them and enchanting them with my energy and my intention. And one thing that I try to teach when I'm doing that is to add etheric force to that. A lot of people leave that component out, but like your etheric force is a perfect conduit from the astral to the physical. Like if you can connect your body or your astral form, whatever the astral plane, to your etheric body and connect it to a talisman, like it just makes it so much more powerful.
Mm-hmm. This is I don't know if you're familiar with elective astrology at all, or like what it is.
Barely.
So typically when we're talking about astrology, we're talking about natal astrology when you're looking at someone's birth.
Right. Okay.
Whereas elective astrology is picking a time in the future that is optimal for something. So a lot of people go to an elective astrologer to find a good time to get married,
or do a spell.
Yeah. So when you are looking to make a talisman of a particular like celestial body, you're looking at where it's positioned in the sky, like in this as it's transiting this. Like, where is it? What's rising on the horizon? Like, where is the moon? The moon is the key to all of it, even accessing our atmosphere. So you need to know where the moon is. Depending on what if it's a fixed star, like you could be waiting months to years to do a perfect election. So there's no such thing as a perfect election, but it's a matter of finding out what you want to deal with, in an imperfect situation. And what's cool about talismans is they're very, very, some say impossible for other magicians to detect them or know what they're for, unless they look that up. So if they're, made in the right timing with the right materials, which some of the materials you probably shouldn't use, because you shouldn't be using, mercury as like your metal of choice. I don't think that's a good idea. But, you can find some good substitutes. Some people have made, decent substitutes. Some people sell these amazing talismans for hundreds and hundreds of dollars because they're very well crafted and beautiful and all that. But I'm a very hands-on kind of bitch. I want to see what I can make. Yeah.
So have you ever carved a talisman into a candle?
Yes.
I love
Yes,
it.
I actually did that. So there was some timing with Algol that was not as good as like what was it, like a year or two ago, where it was amazing. But there was some timing that was an election I had chosen, but it wasn't quite powerful enough for a talisman, and I wanted to sort of experiment. And I was like, I'm gonna have a candle. I'm gonna have a candle. I'm gonna have all the things I would normally do to like channel energies from anything else at any given time without good timing. And I'm gonna infuse it or carve it or designate that it has something from alcohol in it, like something in it. I don't even remember what I used the candle for. I think it was for something to do with Thaumiel. I must have been doing something there.
Sense.
But yeah,
Well,
I,
as somebody who works with Algol as well, I will let you know that I believe, unless I'm wrong, I believe August 11th through 13th, there's going to be a meteor shower in the Perseus constellation directly coming out of Algol, almost like snakes
my
coming from
birthday
the
month
distant
is
past.
popping off. I don't know what's going on. My
So
birthday
make
month
sure
has
you check
all.
out that meteor shower coming out of the star of Algol. It's going to be a powerful time for a lot of us practitioners.
Holy shit. Oh wait, so like where in the world can you see it? I know it's
Um,
Perseus constellation, so
so I believe you can see it from anywhere in the northern hemisphere.
oh
Um, but I may be wrong about that. I know I can see it from where I am.
yeah.
I'm in the eastern part of the mid, it's called the Midwest, but I live on the East Coast, so that sort of tells you where I am, I guess. But I know I can see it from where I am. But it'll if you look up August 11th to August 13th, Al Gold meteor shower, I think even if you
Oh,
can't see it, you'll still be able to draw the energy from it, you know?
I need to I need to find like how there's so many astrologers like it's just flooding Instagram and TikTok and whatever. I need left-hand path astrologers. I need
There's
like
got to be one out there.
I just need I know there's like a book on Clefothic astrology floating out there, but I need like a bunch of like demon bitches giving me the real forecast because I think these fucking mainstream astrologers are terrified of mentioning things like that because I should know. I know everything the fuck else going on in the sky, but I should know about a goddamn meteor shower coming out of Perseus. Like, I need to
Maybe
know this.
maybe or I think Arias, I had to check. I believe Arias is the one who like he was I was doing something for somebody else and I kept seeing a meteor shower in my mind's eye. So I'm like, okay, significant meteor showers coming up on Google and it was like Algol meteor shower August. I'm like, oh, thank you, Arias. Like, there's only about a dozen goetic spirits that I work with, and Arias is one of them. So if you're
I
wanting to
kept
learn
getting the
more
star card. I should have just asked.
if you're
Damn it.
wanting to work with a spirit or a demon for astrology, I can personally recommend Arias. He's awesome. That's how I found out about the Algol meteor shower, more or less.
Clearly, I need a star informant, literally somewhere.
Well, there you go. Yeah,
Need
you
a
can you
better
can be the left
forecast.
hand path go to.
Yeah, yeah, like an Arias cast. Like, all right, what's it?
So, what are some ways that magic has changed your life for the better?
All the ways, all the ways. Yeah,
Awesome.
I think without okay, we were talking about astrology. If you looked at my chart, you'd be like, "Whoa, bitch, you have a lot of squares." Whoa, bitch, you have a lot of fucking oppositions and shit. Like, what the fuck is wrong with your life? Like, why are you
Mhm.
fucking bored at this time? It's like, so literally, if I had not done magic, like I, you know what, I'd probably be more financially stable, but I would be miserable. I'd be miserable as fuck.
Seems like
I
a
would
good
be
trade to
bland as
me.
shit. I would not have purple hair. I would not have a septum ring. I would be very sad, and I would probably still be going to those horrible Thanksgivings and listening to the racist rants and like never changing. Just part of another fucking cog in the machine. But yeah, no, like magic saved my life. Like my first
Same.
altar I ever had in that closet. Um, was the only thing that like pulled me out of suicidality at such a young age. Like it was the only thing I had. I was isolated to the middle of fucking nowhere, you know. I had a shitty, you know, abusive home. Like it was, we weren't poor, but we were denied things. It was very dumb, you know,
Mhm.
and it was just very stressful. And I didn't have, there was no one else like me, like around. Um, you know, I might as well just been the witch. Like I couldn't go anywhere without anyone thinking I was one. So I just and I was
I get
one, but
that.
like, you know, there was like nothing I could do. I was just sort of like, even before I, you know, presented in any particularly like alternative way, people singled me out. People like, it's like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I don't know. And now I look
Nothing.
back, like, they're a divergent, but like, you know, gay, you know, like whatever, like you fucking bisexual loser. Like, yeah, you're of course. Look at you. You have an umbrella in the bright sunlight. People don't know what you're doing. They don't know what you're up to. Like you're weird. And I think
Weird
like,
is good.
yeah, like a lot of, you know, I just having that space where I could feel heard, like in an altar space. Like, and so I guess it was more spirituality, and like spirituality led me to magic, and magic gave me more agency. But um, you know, having a space where I could feel energy, where I could conduct energy, where I could see results from things I wanted in my life, or things I just needed to happen. And I made them happen, and seeing them happen. And I was like, oh, I'm not powerless like everyone else made me believe I was. It's bullshit. I'm not powerless. Like, what else could I do? And even now, I have moments where I'm like, I should have just cast on that. I don't know why the hell I don't know
Right.
why I did all that. Like, I should have just cast on it and forgot about it and like moved the fuck
Uh-huh.
on. And, you know, there's been times like now I even see this, like how quickly an intention of mine can work, especially when I don't think about it. Gesture magic is just amazing, amazing, and and entertaining a lot of the time to see it work right in front of your face. You're like, was it me? Like, was it me? I was
That can
here.
make you feel a little bit crazy too sometimes, especially when you're first getting started and things start working. You mentioned earlier how when you started working with Lilith, how it was like really in your face. That's been my experience, especially with a lot of the more like in so-called infernal entities. Like working with the angels is like, okay, yeah, like I can see how that's working. Like when you work with like demons and like Lilith and Satan, it's like the thing happens. It's very obvious. You can't deny it. It's right there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like they'll straight up just tell you sometimes, like what it was gonna be like, and you're like, I cool. I was, you know, living my chaotic life and coming kind of circling back to the clip off again. Like I was due to like initiate through the next one. I just finished. I finished whatever one's before Golahab, and I think it's Thagirian. Yes. So
Figurian,
I
yeah.
finished Thagirian, and I sort of been putting off like initiating through Golahab, and I didn't even look at what the next Clippa was, who the next ruler was. And I was in my fucking kitchen and I'm stoned and I'm alone, and then all of a sudden Asmodee's there. And I never worked with Asmodeus before. And he's just in my fucking kitchen being like, yo,
It's
I don't know what
time.
I don't know why you've been avoiding me, but I'm the ruler of the next cliff, so you can't anymore. And I was like,
Everybody avoids Golikov. It's like I'm literally like I'm so thankful that tonight's
I
my
was
last
avoiding
night.
Asmodeus. Like I was avoiding him like specifically. I was like, nope, not that one. I don't know
Yeah.
what it was. I was like, not that one. No. And Go Hub is my favorite fucking clip I've initiated through. Like it's my
Really?
favorite one. And I like absolutely just came to adore Asmodeus through that process. And I was just like, that was hectic. I don't like talking about I don't like talking about my initiation through it. It's cringe as fuck now. But I learned so much about how strong I am and how specifically I can manifest something and how I can actually expose something. You know, I can track other people's magic, and that's really fucking cool.
That's
Now I
very
can
cool,
do that.
especially like blood magic or anything that uses like a tag. Like it makes it a lot easier to trace back who it came from. For me, Golakab is all about it's I think it's my least favorite sphere, but I think it's the most important for me. And maybe because it's my least favorite. And every time I get to Golakab, it's like everything that I think is important about my life is tested. It's like it's really is it's that
That's a
testing
good way of
force.
summarizing what my experience was now I look back on it. Like,
Yeah. It's really rough. It's like it's almost like a pre-da'ath. Like it fractures you and makes you look at everything and say
oh,
it
I see.
tests.
You go this other way. I go,
No, well, I go straight down,
okay.
but I still sort of go up the tree, I guess. Like
Yeah.
it's I do different spheres at different times, but there's just this sense of like I'm being tested. So like it's like a test of endurance. Like it's like, oh, you think that's what's important? Do you really need that in your life?
I think for me, it was testing my will of like how far can I go or how am I willing to go
Yeah,
to
yeah.
prove a point? Like in my case, to prove a point. And I was like, yeah, I will. So what kicked it off for me, without getting into like too many cringy details, like I was like really stressed out around the time that I was supposed to initiate, and something was wrong. Something was wrong. Something was off. And like I said, I don't get attacked very often, so I didn't really know what to. But I had this feeling I was like, someone else is interfering with it, and I was mostly pissed off. Like, I could have just like. I think it was Asmodee already influencing me. I could have just fucking like sent it back, fucked it up, moved on. But I was like, no, I'm gonna find out who the fuck is doing this. No, I'm gonna track them the fuck down, and I'm going to humiliate the shit out of them. And because like, how dare they do this to me? How dare they? How dare they fucking touch me? How dare they fucking come for my energy? I'm gonna
Huh.
make everybody else so embarrassed, like through by proxy, that they will never fucking touch me again.
Take an
Like I was
example,
so
yeah.
upset. I felt so violated by their behavior, and I was like, no, I will violate the shit out of you as much as I can. It's gonna be fucking entertaining to me. And I didn't even know how I was gonna do it. I had no idea how I was gonna do it. And I was starting to like build those ideas in my kitchen. That's what I was like doing. I was like, like I was like,
Uh-huh.
and Asmodee was like, I know who it is and I know what they were up to, but if you want to do all this stuff, like I can help you make it. Like I can help you. I was like,
Uh-huh.
yes, okay. You do that because I don't know if I trust you neither. Like I don't you come around, it's a little suspicious. I don't know what's
So
I
then
was
you phased
very
into Golakov, yeah.
I was very paranoid at the time, but it worked in my favor because I'm the kind of paranoid where I will find anything, like everything. Like I'm gonna like every piece of evidence. I'm gathering it, every single fucking piece, and I'm putting it together. So like I know I'm not fucking cray cray, knocked off my rocker. But I taught myself some really cool magic from then, and to this day, like I think I'm getting ahead of myself. There's some questions of yours about it, but like
That's okay.
it's one of the ways that I detect things going on, and I'm kind of selfish with it. I've shared it only with a few people that were dealing with like really messed up stuff, like clients of mine
Mhm.
that, and I've given it to them for free. um but it's one of the things that has worked for me because it works every time. It's not something people anticipate. And I'll speak kind of generally about it. It's the concept of like a trap, so I put things out, like I'm like, oh, someone wants to cast on me, okay, this is what you'll think is me, and this is like what's going to happen. They don't always have to be like aggressive in response. So if I feel like it's not that often that I piss someone off like this, but occasionally someone could be stronger than me, and then maybe because I always speak my mind, maybe I would piss someone off. You know, so I have to anticipate, I'm like, maybe don't send things back from this particular trap. This one's just gonna neutralize things, you know, this one's just gonna like tell them in their divination that it went where it was supposed to go, you know, and just just do that.
Smoke and
There's
mirrors,
other
I love
ones
it.
that I have a whole script set up for their divination. So like, I mean, like I have a whole script that if they were to read on it, then, oh, I'm sick, I'm puking blood, I'm doing all the things you want me to do. Yes, yes, and I miss you so much. Oh no, like I have that all written in there. So I'm like, you feed their delusion and make them feel better, and I
Mhm.
can just live my happy life, and no one has to be envious of me. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I one of the things that I love about Foros is like I use him for like wealth and hidden treasure and stuff like that, but I also use him for invisibility because like a lot of times people will get envious and shit like that. So like I'm better off in my mind just like going unnoticed than having to like retaliate and reverse all kinds of, it's just a waste of time. I'd rather just go unnoticed and just sort of, you know, go under people's blinds. But if somebody does come after me, I see what you mean. There's like layers to it. There's subterfuge. There's, you know, like it takes a lot for me to actually retaliate on someone because a lot of the time like I'll just be reversing, wait till they run out of energy, and then it's like, okay, then I'll crack my knuckles, you know, and like get to work. And like once they're tired and out of energy, it's like then I'll start to drain them, then I'll start to bind and silence them, you know what
yeah,
I mean, and then it's time to get to work.
I
But
have some
it takes a
fuckers
lot for
with
me to get
mirror
there.
boxes just
Mirror
charging up in
boxing,
their
yeah.
little space,
Yes,
and they keep hitting
absolutely.
themselves. Why are you hitting yourself? You know, and I just let that kind of brew for a bit until I decide what I want to do. You know, like I love that kind of thing. It's interesting you say about like keeping invisible because I think that was my default for a long time. I was really just sort of like that. That's why you hear from people who are like, oh, I know her YouTube channel way back because I was just sort of like posting a video like once a year, and I was just
Uh-huh.
like hiding and just minding my own business. And I didn't. I was always like, these people who get into witch wars are fucking drama hungry bitches. And I just, my entire Clefothic initiation, what was I doing? And so like, it thrust me out like in perception, you know, and I had to deal with a lot more evil eye than I was used to. And I had to deal with, um, you know, just criticism all the time. And I sort of just learned that like, when people come at you with all this energy, it's like they're giving you this power. Like some people
Transmute it.
come at me
Yeah.
like, I remember I had like 400 followers or something on fucking TikTok, and some guy was like pressed, and he was like, "You're a small time influencer." Anyway, I was like, "Influencer? I don't have a single sponsorship. You think I can get this one? You think I can be an influencer? Like, you think I can be an influencer?" And I started to like realize I was like, a lot of like haters like see all this potential and authority and all these things in me that like, why don't I see those things in me? Why do you see what what am I missing that like you're seeing?
Uh-huh.
Like, okay, let me roll with that. Let me see where that takes me. And you're already giving me this like status. And I'm wondering, I'm like, are some of them like trolls on my side? Like I wonder sometimes. It just fuels me. I think some people like really just want attention, so they'll say something just to hear you like clap back at it. You know what I mean? Like that they'll I think some people really do like this shit they say.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, so I only respond to things I think are, you know, entertaining. But like, you know, you just have to like pushing yourself out in public. I realized there was like some, as much as I like, you know, I'm definitely still like somebody who just has my own life, and I don't prioritize the internet.
Hmm.
But I'm trying to like create more content. I'm trying to be more out there because I'm like, everyone else is teaching, not everyone else, but like a lot of people are teaching in ways that frustrate me deeply, like about witchcraft, about especially about the left hand path, and especially about Satanism. Like there's some wonderful people teaching about Satanism that certainly have helped me, but I just there's not enough voices for that side of things, and so I have to put my knowledge out there. I'm not going to have any children. So I need to put out my knowledge somewhere for people to access it, or it's just going to be what for me for what, why. So, getting more comfortable doing that. And I've just been very like open, and I've not let anyone kind of tell me, like in the past, people would always be like, why are you showing your altar? Don't show your altar. Blah, blah, blah. But I was like, fuck you. I remember altar tours back on old fucking witchy YouTube, and I'm not going to stop. And I learned too that if you look like someone who shares everything, no one anticipates what you're hiding. Like no one
That's a really good
anticipates what the
point.
fuck you're hiding. So like,
I
you
love
have
that.
this whole level of freedom. Like how well does someone think they know you versus like who you are? Because like I'm like, there's something to that parasocial like celebrity factor people have where, you have this image of somebody, you have the brand of someone. It's not who the fuck they are. There's still someone who probably like has taken a shit while crying before. You know what I mean? Like they've probably done that. They've probably, maybe if they drank too much this weekend, they've probably done it this weekend.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
but they have you believe in, they've never farted in their life, they have a brand, you see them in this very like literally, on the screen, a two-dimensional
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah.
And people aren't prepared for the 3, 4, 5, 11th dimensional things going on. And so I think this path, like as much as it can be exciting and it's so cool to like talk with people, it's so fucking isolating, alienating sometimes, because even amongst other spiritual people, like, and I love being around so many spiritual people, but it's really hard to explain anything like deeply demonic that isn't like this cookie cutter Solomonic method. And it's really hard to explain the philosophy, so to speak, behind the left-hand path and like adjacent currents to it. People like really don't understand. Like I think I would like briefly mention that like some days I have to pick up liquor for a certain guy,
Yeah.
like, oh, Monday I can't do it in the morning because I have to do this, for my death saint in the morning. And people are like, oh, okay, like what's that about? Why do you work for the death saint? Like what was he of? And I'm like, oh, I can't really say his name, but he's saint of murder. Like they're like, oh, why
And
would
they don't get
you,
it.
they're like, why would you honor that? And I was like, well, I get the question. I would have asked the same question like a while ago, but like I'm like, I can't get you to understand the beauty of the
There's a
devil,
lot that
or
goes
I can't,
into working with the death current. Yeah.
yeah, I can't get you to understand like the beauty of decay and impulse, and things that are violent and terrifying. Like there's something to look at there. There's something to like explore. And if you're not willing to look for God in those places, like, are you really fucking spiritual, or are you just like this sanitized, recycled, gentrified form of whatever trending modality on the right hand path? Like, so it's just 70s, it was Hinduism, like butchered and chopped up and whitewashed. And now I think it's some weird fusion of like Crystal Girl and Buddhism and whatever going on. And it's hard to communicate
Interesting.
with people because they don't know what their foundation is, and they're just trying to find their way. But when we impose these like what I call secularized Christian ideas about like light and dark and black and white, these binary things, even when people don't admit them, they're like, oh, you need balance, but as soon as they see like a dark figure in a room, they're quick to banish it, right? You're not going to even ask it why it's there. But you'd be fooled by something that looks like a bunch of light and floaty shit. If I was something that wanted to hurt you, what would I present myself as? What would I present myself as? Something obviously threatening, or come on, think ahead. I don't know. There's not a lot of cognitive cognition going on for some
Yeah.
people, and I worry
Yeah.
because I think also with the hexing and the cursing we were talking about, a lot of it's a mental game. A lot of it's just
Absolutely.
like,
Oh yeah. Self-hexing and self-cursing is definitely a thing. That's one thing I learned from NLP, like neuro linguistic programming, is like every time somebody says like, man, every time this happens, that, and I'm like, just stop, just hush. Like you obviously don't know how much power you have with every single word. So you need to like, fix your diarrhea of the mouth, because like what the shit that you're saying is making your life worse and you don't even realize it. Like you have to teach people how to talk so that you can make your life better. And if there's two things that this channel is about, you mentioned both of them with what you just said. One of them is trying to teach people like what there is out there, like what's available, because there was things that I wish that I knew and I was just starting, and I wish I knew that there was more than one way. And like the other thing that this channel is about is showing the different perspectives. Like I've done like almost 24 of these interviews at this point, and every single one of them has been so different. And it's such a beautiful thing, because if you literally can't watch this channel without seeing that it's about like that there's no secret. The secret is that there's no secret. Like everybody has their own way of doing things.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I think I get a lot of messages from people. How do I sell my soul? How do I do this? Like, and I just sit there. I'm like, I'm eventually gonna make a FAQ video or something. Like, I'm eventually just gonna sit down and be like, yo, you're not gonna get this. I've given the simplest ritual once. I went on TikTok of all fucking places. I was like, listen to me. This is how you talk to the devil if you want to do it. Okay. You sit here, you shut the fuck up, and you listen. That's it. He's the devil. He knows you're calling him. Like and when he comes, it's obviously him. So I don't know, like and before you say it's dangerous, it's the devil. So just do it or don't, like, and I know, and I feel fine sharing it because I know a lot of you are not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's not flashy. There's no goat blood. There's no, a lot of you are not going to fucking do it.
Mhm.
And I've had so many people like really insist when I tell them, you don't have to sell your soul. There's nothing to sell. There's nothing to sell because like it's
Yeah.
yours. It's yours. It's yours. You have ownership over it, but you can't separate yourself from it. So there's no giving of it.
Exactly.
There's nothing to to transact. And they're like, no, but what if I do this? I'm like,
You
you
don't get it.
can get what you want without doing that. They
Yeah.
think I'm hiding something from them. They're like so insistent that they know more than me. And I'm like, why are you asking me then? If you know more than me, then it's like, or ask the one who's going to tell you what you want to hear. Why the fuck are you asking me? Like,
Yeah.
have you seen my content? Have you seen anything I'm making? Like, I've talked a lot about the concept of selling a soul and what that means to me allegorically, and what that, like, how I view that. And like, I remember mentioning in one of my videos, I was like, I remember meeting Satan and because I'm human, and because as a human, I had never had divinity have such reverence for me from such a
Right.
high or low place,
Holy shit.
that
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with that. And I just wanted to give the only thing I had, which was my soul,
Your time
back,
and
because I didn't know what
attention.
else
Yeah.
to do. I was like, would you like this? Like, you want it. You're the greatest thing ever. Would you like it? And literally, I already know the answer before he answers. And he's just like, it's yours.
Mm-hmm.
The fuck you mean? What I want it? It's yours. I only want it to be yours. If it ceased to be yours, it has no value at all. I want it to stay where it is. Like, that's how I have reverence for you. Duh. And you're like, shit, man, that's deep. Like, that, like, you want to cry. You're like, oh my gosh, like, this powerful, powerful being has so much respect for life, for humanity, and for
Yeah.
specifically me. Like, it's, not above anyone else necessarily, but it's just like, it changes your perspective on yourself entirely. You're just like, I've been living in this matrix, this cult of self-deprecation that is around everyone and everything all the fucking time. And it's
Yes.
various forms of it are glorified and fucking sanctified and taught to people and taught in office buildings and in
Oh, yeah.
churches and everywhere. And it's like, even in queer spaces, it breaks my heart when I'm in a queer space and I hear fucking bullshit like, forgive your abusive ass homophobic fucking parent. No, the fuck. No, don't do that. It's not healthy to do that. If you can love someone and not forgive them. You don't need, like, you can't forgive something that has threatened your humanity. That is hurting you. Don't
That's
do
a
that.
recipe for disaster. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't do that, because when we examine what forgiveness is in our society, it's just a nice word for enabling. Because if someone has changed their behavior, if someone has made the improvements, like, there's nothing to forgive. You either accept them back into your life or you don't. And that's all there is to do. You either accept that they've changed or you don't. There's no need for like, here's my forgiveness. All it is an opportunity for someone to do it again. So like, I
Absolutely.
firmly believe like there's reconciliation and then there's enabling. And so
That's
I think
yeah.
I think that's all there is to it. There's reconciliation and communication and understanding and change behavior, or there's enabling. And our
Mhm.
society normalizes enabling and this glorification of forgiveness that is just unhealthy. It's a prime example of what I mean when, like, there's secularized Christian ideas that are harmful out of context. That concept of forgiveness may work in Christianity, but it does not work everywhere. It's not a
Yeah,
good
forgiveness
idea
isn't always
everywhere.
the answer. I agree.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I'm fairly aggressive with it, but I also believe being a Satanist means taking sides. So I'm fairly aggressive with most of my positions on things.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't like seeing people self-deprecate. Nothing like frustrates me more. I know what that feels like, and I know where that leads. It almost killed
Absolutely.
me. It almost killed me. And even today, I was talking with someone. It's a coworker I just met, and like, she was having a real like negative self-talk out loud. It was making me like
Yeah.
worry for her, and I was just
Yeah.
like, listen, if this is how you feel around this person, or this is how you feel around the situation, like, you can't do this to yourself. You can't do this to yourself, and she just can't get out of the loop right now. And that's just where
I'm
she's
glad you
at.
said something. Yeah. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't know they don't have to live their life that way just because they were raised being talked to like shit. Like that program is like a virus, like in their terminal. And
Oh
like,
yeah, no. It absolutely is. And I know it all too well. I know that fucking virus and that fucking voice.
same.
And
Oh, yeah. You recognize it right away.
yeah.
Right away. Uh huh.
And without getting like too political, I remember this meme that helped me deeply. And it was like, just imagine Donald Trump saying it. I was like, oh, it lost all its power. Like, it's lost all its power. I don't care anymore.
That's hilarious.
Like, sorry if you like Donald Trump, but not sorry at all. Um, but like, imagine that someone that is a piece of shit, like,
Yeah.
saying
That you
that thing to
disagree
you.
with. Yeah.
Suddenly it changes everything. And I think of like, the old like Grecian form of a daimon, or the Roman genius,
Hmm.
where certain parts of the psyche were externalized, and scientists say like, oh, the Greeks couldn't understand the thoughts in their head were their own thoughts. And I'm like, no, they just had a different cultural understanding of how
We
they were
haven't
thinking
changed
or
that
how they
much
received
in 2000
information.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, and they just had a different cultural understanding. They were like, oh, the brains haven't developed. It's like, come on, they were doing mathematics that we're still using.
Yeah.
Out of here. Ancient peoples are more intelligent than we give them credit for.
Probably so. Yeah.
This is why we need anthropologists in history. But um but basically, like, I remember an artist speaking on the same topic, and she was saying how when you as the artist think that all of your inspiration is just coming from you, and you conceptualize it as just that, and that you have to wait for inspiration to happen to you, you have all this pressure on yourself, and it leads to this depression. It leads to this feeling of like, I'm not good enough. I'm not an artist. I'm not creative. Like, oh, I suck at my art. Everything I create sucks. Or even if I created it, no one would like it. Or you just start to like impede yourself creatively over and over again. Whereas when the people could externalize it as like this other being and be like, where's my idea today? I gave you your cookie. Like, where's my idea? And then all of a sudden, like something seems like it's okay. Well, I guess that's what I'm painting today. That's fucking weird, but I'm gonna paint it. So it would just get you to paint it. You get you to like exercise on a mundane level, right? If we're not taking it to any like literal spiritual place, like it gets you to like exercise, you know, the muscle to make that art, or to write that script, or to like to do whatever you needed to do, because it's not just your responsibility anymore. It's much easier to blame this imaginary friend for not getting our shit together. It's time to get our ass in gear. Like
That's totally what magic is about for me, is contacting that higher daemon or higher genius, or contacting the shadow, and every varying degree. And to me, that's what the Shem angels and the Goetic spirits represent, are like degrees of my daemon and my shadow. And that's how I have used them. And that's how it's worked for me so far. It's not perfect, but it's like the best that I have right now. And I love that whole concept of externalizing a part of yourself and personalizing it so that you can get, extract information from it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and that you don't have to feel like responsible for every little part of it. And I think it's weird because only now, as all sciences eventually do, are catching up to magic. And we
Yeah,
have
it's so true.
and we have things like the inner child, in
Uh-huh.
psychology and all that. And it's like, well, I'm personifying, a piece of my psyche from the past as like a form of myself that I can externalize and communicate and reparent and all these things. Is
Yes.
that not fucking like tulpa making or something? Is that
Yeah.
not fucking like, it's not quite, it's some form of evocation in some way, regardless of whether or not you're doing it in a ritual setting. Although, a lot of the times psychologists are having you, journal about it, or think on this exercise, or think back to a memory and all this stuff. It's all this dream walking that you're doing
Yeah.
for therapy.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so funny, like for me, the difference between science and magic isn't what we know or what we don't know, because indigenous people, women, queer people have known these things for a long ass time. It's just that certain people have the power to determine them as a fact and other people don't. And so, we have all these systems in place that verify something as a fact, wonderful. But if some people do not have access to that system, or that system is inherently inaccessible, then it's a faulty system for what is true and what's not. We have to remember at some point doctors told us cigarettes were good for us. So, capitalism plays a huge role in what is and isn't a fact, and what is and isn't
That's
healthcare.
that's a scary fact that a lot of people don't want to admit, that I,
Yeah.
I think is ultimately true.
Yeah. And I'm not sitting here like against vaccinations or medication or anything like that. Like we should all, keep up to date with the modern science to take care of ourselves. But it's not the end all be all. And I think when we prop up any Western way of knowing that's very secular, we miss a lot of knowledge from other places and other people, because a lot of oppressed people are very spiritual, and there is knowledge there is medicine there's even science to find there.
I agree.
Like I would be frustrated because my dad was a big like, is a big like sciencey, trend guy, so he would keep up with whatever discoveries are being made or whatever the hell, and he would tell me about something, I'd be like, that already exists. That's already this
Yeah,
form of
we
magic that's already been there. And if you just talk to indigenous people about that, like you'd fucking already know that. And it was just it would get frustrating to me like over and over again to see like, I'm like, so it's only like white men that get to decide that this is valid. And it would frustrate me mostly because, not because like they got to declare it, but because they would have to rename it and claim that they're debunking the very thing they just discovered because they renamed it and like created a different form of understanding it. And it would just frustrate the shit out of me. I'm like, if we have generational memory, is that not past lives? Is that not
Yeah, very
past
much in a
lives?
way. Yeah,
Well, the way we conceptualize past lives now is kind of fucky, but like in a lot of those like Strega lineages, it was believed you reincarnated within your own bloodline. So
sure.
it literally is that we knew that we could
Mhm.
remember our ancestors' memories, and
Right.
that's just how we understood it. I'm now that ancestor again. Like
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
carry that with me, and there's science behind that to prove that, and there's science to prove that like people can feel the effects of, and it wasn't even that long ago, but people can feel the effects of slavery on their bodies today, through ancestral memory. So this is all like valuable things that like people have known for a long time, but psychologists have diagnosed people who've known it as crazy or as schizophrenic or as like not in touch with reality. With in fact they perceived a form of reality that just wasn't validated by the right people yet, and I find that
Yeah,
problematic.
those people weren't using the right tools to measure the components that they were denying a lot of times. So you mentioned generational memory, and I love that concept because it's like my DNA remembers what my ancestors' nose looked like. It remembers what my ancestors' height and dimensions were. Like there's something to that, definitely. I also love how you mentioned tulpas. I'm familiar with tulpas through Blavatsky. Is Blavatsky someone that you
Yeah,
have
I'm
read?
somewhat familiar. I've not read a lot of
Okay,
her, but like I'm familiar with her.
you're
Yeah,
someone that okay.
yeah.
Are there any other authors that you would like to mention? You mentioned Clifothic meditation. Did you just use the usual like V.K. Johannem, Senoth Mason, Kenneth Grant, Thomas Carlson milieu, or was there other
Oh,
things that you?
subtract the VK Johanna, but like I had, I had like yeah, the Thomas Carlson book helped me a lot. I explored a bit of, I think Rose Crowley's videos helped me a lot.
Okay,
I
yeah,
like the
yeah, I'm
way,
familiar with her.
yeah, I like the way she talks about things where she brings in a lot of different thematic sources to sort of illustrate her point.
Yeah,
And that's the way I think as like I was gonna be an English major too. Yeah. Like I let's bring in some supporting text, and
love it.
I like that she doesn't shy away from I don't do this thing that a lot of people on the left hand path do because my personal values, but I can appreciate it in someone else where they're going to pull from a lot of different political sources. They're going to pull from a lot of different perspectives to make their point. And I can at least admire that, outside of this reality. I could admire like delving a bit deeper, but like her perspectives on it were interesting. And I liked that she just sort of delved right into the energy of it. She sort of like delved right into like the frequency and the vibration, gave me a feeling for what that is, because it's so difficult to explain the cliff
Uh-huh.
art. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like when I say Golahab, when you mention Golahab, like I know what you mean when you're saying like
Mhm.
you've experienced this and that because like I've been there. But if
Mhm.
I was trying to explain it to someone else, I'm like, yeah, it's ruled by Mars, and it's the burning one. And they're like, okay, well, what was the last one? I was like, well, there was one with like the devouring ravens, and they're like, so it's a bunch of ravens. And I'm like, no,
You don't
sometimes
get it. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what's more important is like, this, and they're like, what? I don't get it. But yeah, it's beyond words, but I admire her ability to like put it into words. And so I've really leaned on that. Also, Mason writes beautifully. It just illustrates this lush, like rich environment, like psychically, visually, or whatever. I
Yeah.
leaned less and less on it. I leaned less and less on it, and just sort of found my own landscapes to be in. But it was kind of cool
Yeah.
to not read it, go in, go back, and
And
find
then
what
see
was
how
similar.
similar.
That's sort
Yeah.
of how I use books now. So I always feel awkward when people are like, "Oh, what author you recommend for this and that?" I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know if what I'm doing is reading. I don't know what I'm
I
doing is
I
really
use a lot of that
reading.
stuff. I use a lot of that stuff like a template. Like I will look into what everybody else has looked into, and then I will sort of drink it in and meditate on it, and then I'll take what I like from them and I'll use it as inspiration to write my own stuff. And I think
Mm,
that's one of the best ways to do it is like your soul knows, like your intuition knows what you need to visualize and what you need to hear. I just love how a lot of us see similar things like floating pyramids in the desert or, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I know exactly which like Clifford you're talking about when you say that, because like that the album art like just like came through like that. Oh my God, that one was so much fun. You know what? Yeah, I definitely need to go through again because like
You
Cliff
should.
the earlier clip off, like we're like it's like really nice time. Like I want to
Yeah,
go back to
yeah.
there. Yeah. It got so intense at the end, but it also like kind of threw me for a loop, like post Abyss. Like it sort of
Like
like
for me, after Thagirion, it starts getting heavy. I explain them like gravity zones. Like as you get in there, it's like, oh yeah, this feels kind of interesting. But like the further in you get, you're like, okay, yeah, I forgot how uncomfortable this was. And like you just get more and more pressure as you go until you get popped out of the abyss on the other side. And then it's just like you're floating, you know?
yeah. But that's what unsettled me was this like floating. I was like no, why isn't there more happening? Like why isn't there? Yeah, and I think definitely it's these like different like astral layers like
Mhm.
to the tree of death because certainly I feel it more like yeah I feel it around this area with the Girion, but I feel it mostly with like it was a Rabsarak and
Yeah.
Golahov that really like fucked me up. Like the Girion was this kind of like little stop in between for the
Yeah.
most part,
It's a
and
picnic
I
in
was
the
like
park. Yeah.
I had to do some like inner child things. I had to do like a sacrifice, and it was like this like healing good time. There was something kind of edgy that went down, but I was like, that wasn't the focus. Um, that was a cool time, but yeah, like it was like this sort of little pit stop, this little like, okay, stop, pee, go, like.
Yeah, exactly. It's like so much interesting the more you go through as well because you start to notice differences. And I think the further you go in, the less it becomes like a ladder and the more it becomes like, I don't know, like a home. Like I when the first few times or the first couple of times I went through, it was like, like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. But now I'm starting to feel like, okay, yeah, I've done this before. Yeah, I was doing this as a kid. I just didn't realize it. Like maybe I'll go here. So going through again is a totally different experience, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I'm like excited to do it again, but I'm also just sort of like, I feel like I'm already in it. I don't know. It always happens to me where I'm like, I'm just constantly in that energy in some way.
Yeah, I feel
And
that.
yeah, and but it's like this chaos that always is getting better. Like I don't know how else to describe it. It's like sort of like I don't want to say failing upward, but it's like
I love that
but if I do
expression.
fail
That's
it, like it's
perfect.
kind of like just like pulls me up like this like undercurrent and like brings me back upward. And sometimes it's like a lot of these like tower moments have to happen or these
Yeah.
judgment moments have to happen where these things are like knocked down and I'm like, okay, like I don't even know where I'm going from here. All I know is that like whenever shit gets knocked down, something better happens. So I'm just gonna keep going with it and see where it goes. And then it's like just something way better than I ever could have even
Mhm.
manifested on my own, just
Yeah.
like coming towards me. And I'm like, okay, shit, where's this going now? And what I've like learned to do in that entire time is the best way to not get off track is to bet on yourself. Just like whatever the fuck is going on with other people or other things, like just bet on yourself. Like just doesn't mean you can't care about other people, but if you find yourself focused too much on something outside of you, you're not doing it right. Get back, root yourself back in yourself because you just can't do it, girl. Don't do that.
That's such great advice. You've mentioned Lilith and Satan. Are there any other main entities that you feel are crucial to your development or have been in the past? Astaroth, perhaps. I saw an Astaroth sigil on your wall at one point in one of your videos, I believe. Oh, you've got a pendant or
I
a
have her today, yeah.
amulet, yeah.
For sure. She was the first goetic spirit that I ever invoked. And that was a good time. And I was just sort of like, wow, this is really cool. And I didn't do it the whole triangle method or whatever. I straight up just was like, I'm
Sure.
going to take a whole ass mirror and put hers on and just say her N and just stare into it. That's fine. And I did all that. And that was like cool. That was really great. She was very like chill with me. And from there, I just sort of, Lilith kept like bringing, she's like, okay, more. And started bringing like more demons at me. And, Belial and I started like, Belial, I think I was like, just so, I kick myself now for, I'm like, if there's ever a demon that you really want to summon and you're used to darker entities, like if there's ever a demon you really want to summon, everyone says, oh, don't summon this one yet, or you need to do fucking don't listen to that. Like they literally just want to keep that demon to themselves. Okay, like they just don't want to share that demon with you, because like why else would that demon be so popular if they're that difficult to work with? Like get the fuck out of here, go work with them. So Belial, awesome. I did a ritual with Belial recently. Every time I work with him, like, is so rewarding. If you have issues with self-confidence, like, Belial is not this big scary asshole, okay? You see who he picks to work with? It's neurodivergent crybabies. So go, he likes transforming people like that into badasses. So just go to him, please. Let less whiny people in the world. It'd be wonderful. So I love Belial. Asmodee was someone I didn't expect to love working with. As I said before, love working with him. I have to take breaks every once in a while, just because of his sass. What else I got here? Vapula in and out sometimes. Outside the Goetias thing, Abaddon is a big favorite now. I love working with him. Previous to all the hellish guys, like Hecate, Nyx, Pan,
Sure.
Cat is snoring. Whatever my cat is, she's some kind of weird, like, there is a familiar spirit inside there.
Cats are awesome.
And the death site I mentioned earlier, and those are
Sure.
they know what I mean. And sort of Jinn, I'm still figuring out the Jinn.
They're interesting.
I dipped my toe in one sort of, she's around sometimes. She does whatever she's doing. I guess there's 3 more that want to be in communication with me. I'm putting pause on it just because I have a lot of other things going on, and it seems like it's going to demand a lot of my attention. And there's a lot of research I need to do, frankly, with the Jinn. And it's just something that, like, just like to be as culturally aware as I can. I want to be aware of things. I don't want to set myself up for anything that inevitably with the Jinn, I'm going to be unprepared for something. But
I think that's true. I think you can say that with any new current.
There's probably something
you're going to overlook.
Vibe of spirit. It's interesting because, like, I guess some Jinn mesh really well with the demonic. Some demonic, some people say like King Asmodee was like also king of the
Feels
Jinn,
that way to me.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Some people theorize all of the Goetia are Jinn. A lot of as I was reading, this is sort of interesting. A lot of people who know about Jinn probably already know this, but I was like panning through. I think I found it online. It's just like an official PDF of this like academic work where it's a transcript of it's translated into English of the researcher, I forget the title, so I'm so sorry to anyone who's like Muslim and I'm not remembering the title, but it's basically a Muslim exorcist and the person possessed by Jinn. So basically the Jinn is speaking, the exorcist, and like there's the researcher. And some of these conversations are very interesting. In the process of removing Jinn, you can see how much of the Catholic Church has taken these concepts and like put them into Catholicism, because it's almost like right there. But the conversations are hilarious sometimes between
which is so true if you've ever worked with goetic spirits. Like
so one conversation I read was like So the jinn, all these jinn have possessed people. So like this one jinn inside someone is there, and they're like, what are you doing? And they always say, what are you doing in this person? And say, I'm hanging out. You know, they have like really silly answers sometimes. They're just like, I wanted to be here. I wanted to ride the plane. One of them said, I wanted to ride a plane, and I want to go with you to ride the plane. You know, and they're like, get out of this person. No, hits the Jen with a stick. Ow, says the Jen, and it's like, get out of this person. Jen says, ow, no, and then like hits them again. Ow, okay, like
Like a
that's
Looney
just the
Tunes cartoon.
conversation. It's like, ow,
Yeah.
okay, the Jen left, and then like that's a lot of the stories that you're just like, okay, cool. Like do it again. Like that's great. It's no exaggeration. It's just what happened, I guess. Very honestly. I don't think that was from too long ago. I think that was like a lot of these possessions were from the 80s or something. So they're not that old.
Okay.
It's just fascinating. I was like, this is so cool to see how these concepts like meld over. And I have a lot of theories when it comes to the supposed involuntary possession people, you know, claim to have when it comes to like aggressive, malevolent things coming out of people. I have a lot of like psychological, scientific theories about that because it's interesting to me that only repressive religions seem to have involuntary possession at such high numbers.
A lot of
In
my
which they
associates
say
have a very
things,
similar theory. Yeah.
yeah, in which they say things that maybe they wouldn't ordinarily be able to say, and express things that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to confess, and do things that they would ordinarily be punished for doing. So, you
Uh-huh.
know, and get a lot of special attention where they normally just be like a face in the crowd. It's just you know,
It's
interesting
convenient.
to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the opportunity there is, especially for young women to express themselves, similarly to what happened in the 1600s over here, right? Like
Interesting.
repressive society where like young girls get, because the most possessed, the groups of people that supposedly get most possessed, at least according to the Catholic Church, are like teenage girls,
Interesting.
which is also just suspicious in and of itself. Who are you targeting as possessed? Who are you, you know, saying is demonic or under an influence because they're not acting the way you want them to? You know, I've known people, like queer people, who've been exorcised, and it was
Right.
traumatic, and there's nothing they could have done to convince anyone they weren't possessed. So, you know, understanding that and the severe, you know, trauma and like acting out that the body might do in that case, and you know, there's that. But I also think there's something to repressing anger and repressing fear, repressing sexual desire. There's a lot of that manifests. If you watch these weird evangelicals get possessed, there's a lot of them touching themselves. Like there's a lot of them doing like some weird shit. I love watching people do weird shit. That's why I studied anthropology, because I love learning about what ways in which we make our minds view the world, and we make everyone around us, or our culture makes us behave in certain ways, usually for some like probably some long forgotten evolutionary reason to do it.
Yeah, that resonates with me pretty deeply, because to me, suppression and repression is related to the shadow, and the infernal is related to the shadow. And I have seen some exorcisms and performed some exorcisms that were very indicative of repressed energy, and oftentimes very sexual or very culturally deviant, very taboo.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because like I've witnessed a few possessions and a few like exorcisms of that, and I've aided in that, and it was weird to me to watch it, because everyone else sort of externalized what they were saying, and we were claiming that something was burying itself inside someone and not come out. And I was like, well, that's where it came from. You know what I mean? Like I could see like that's where it came from. It didn't come from anywhere else. Like it
Right.
was like rooted there a long time, and now you're claiming to get rid of it. It's not gone. It's just gonna, it's either that version of it may be gone, but something worse is gonna grow in its place. You know what I mean? So like, it's not my practice, and I just like was gonna follow suit with whatever, the leader was, because they know that better than me or whatever. But I could see it, and it was interesting too that there was one entity, manifestation, whatever you want to call it in particular, that I felt like when it was out of that person, it was trying to just grab onto anything else in the room,
Mhm.
like, and I was the most attractive, like, dark thing to go to in the room, and I was like, no,
Oh,
like, no, you go back, you go wherever you need to hide, but not on me. No, thank you. We don't need attention on me in this moment. I'm just here as an observer. You get the fuck out of this space. And I was fine. I was conscious the whole time. There were certain times when I felt like, the ickiness, like the ickiness in your
yeah,
stomach,
yeah.
and this like kind of like
Uh-huh.
haziness in your vision, and you're like, fuck, stay conscious. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't let it go. Don't do that. Oh no. Yeah. I think I definitely think, like, for the majority of these, like, very, as you said, like, deviant, conveniently deviant, like, possessions, because I played around with, like, I played around with voluntary possession, or even just like kind of
Same.
unplanned possession, I'd say.
Mhm.
And for me, it's like it feels like it's giving my body a break. Feels like it's
Yeah, no
me a
kidding.
break from my body, or however you want to conceptualize it. But I'm aware of what's going on. Like, I'm aware
Mhm.
of how my body is being used, as anyone should be when they're being possessed. Like, and although I may act strangely, I don't think I'm acting in any ways that I'm, going to be embarrassed by after, or anything like that. I'm just sort of like, okay, like, I'm crawling on all fours right now, and I guess that's fine. Like, like, that's fine. I'm moving like a weird snake person, like, whatever I'm doing, like, that's okay. Um, and I'm seeing things differently, right? Because I almost, there's like a different mind in here,
Yeah, that's one
showing
of
me
the
stuff, and
yeah.
showing me what my body can be capable of. Sometimes it's like, oh, okay, like, I didn't know I could, like, that I'm comfortable moving in that way, or like I have that flexibility, or maybe that dance move I was too, like, afraid to try. Like, maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll try it out if I can move that way. And so, you start to feel the energy differently throughout your body. And I have like a system that I've adapted, from, I don't know if you've heard of, like, the Anderson Fairy or the reclaiming traditions at all.
Mhm.
So it's a form of witchcraft that's very different. So that's fairy, Feri, not fairy, like, yeah. Although there's
Okay.
other fairy things related to it,
Like
but
Karin, like the ferry to the underworld.
no, Feri, the name, Anderson Fairy. Yeah,
Okay.
Anderson
Got you.
hyphen Fairy, yes. Or just reclaiming tradition. But
Okay.
there's it's an initiatory tradition, so as a non-initiate, there's only so much I know.
Hmm.
It's a form of its own traditional witchcraft that uses a completely different system than anything that most of us are familiar with. Because most of us are familiar with, like, a flat, you know, um, magical circle where we have a compass, and instead they cast through a seven dimensional sphere, basically.
Makes sense.
So
Okay.
they have a completely different, like, system, but there's recurring symbols, and one of the recurring symbols that, outsiders or non-initiates can have access to is the Iron Pentacle. And this is like an understanding of the human body,
Hmm.
iron, which is an element within the human body, the human blood, and also within the stars and the earth, that is
Hmm.
a current through the body in the
Right.
formation of a pentacle. And each point has a meaning. And it's funny, we were talking about Astaroth, because, like, I had begun a path working in that system, and I was going to learn about it, because the only system I've ever really been seriously considering initiating in was the Anderson Fairy reclaiming tradition. And so
Okay.
I was like, I gotta know this anyway if I want, to be invited into something to initiate through. And so I had begun working on it, doing the shadow work with that, because a wonderful social worker friend that I met at a goth club gave me the book about it. She mailed me that book, and I had begun the work in college. I graduated college. I forgot all about it. And I was just so caught up in what I was doing with my demonic work. And Astaroth, for some reason, she just like pulled me aside. She had me draw a pentacle, and I put specific demons, including her, like around the pentacle. And I was like, this didn't make sense elementally at all. I was like,
Right.
what the fuck? This doesn't make any sense elementally. And then she's like, go grab this book. Go to the bookshelf. I was like, okay. And I was like, and I just looked at the infernal iron, like the Iron Pentacle book. I pull it out. I flip it upside down, and I look at the pentagram I drew, and the points on there, and the points that are in the Iron Pentacle corresponded to the demons perfectly. And I was
Wow.
like, okay, so that's this system that I'm going to now do. And if I can invoke them or check in with that spirit about that particular area of my life, or that particular power or deficiency I have, then it's something that I can like work through with them. And I have a guide within my own like physical and energetic, like nervous system, so to
Right.
speak, my vascular system and my blood. So it's like really cool. That's something that I would often use to just activate myself instead of doing a circle. Is just
Yeah,
like doing that
exactly.
simple
Yeah.
meditation where I'm envisioning the Iron Pentacle through me. And I just have the added bonus of having like demons attached to those concepts that I can discuss. Like, because what you do is you essentially in that tradition is you would do an exercise called running iron, and the authors of that book have a video out to teach you how to run iron. Gede Parma, and I think they go by Theo Gede Parma now, and I forget the co-author's name. I can track down the book for you later. But they have like a video out where they like basically just teach you like how to run iron, and that's how you would assess what points in your pentacle essentially are strong or weaker or need more attention. And so the idea is you would give that area of your life or that aspect of yourself more attention and more, work with it more, and you would balance out the pentacle. So you
I
would
like
be in a
that.
more even state. There are more advanced pentacles in their system beyond the
Sure.
Iron Pentacle, but that's the one that like everyone has access to because everyone has iron in their blood. Everyone has iron all around us. So that's the baseline for like everything that you're going to learn in that tradition. So it's just something that like Astaroth helped me adapt and work with something I already knew. And that's of
Okay.
course a much more pagan vein of things than all of this. Very, very neo-pagan, and it's a very, very mishmashed like tradition together. There's like elements of Hawaiian spirituality. There's even things like the blue god, and so there's a lot of things sort of thrown in, but they're thrown in ways that make sense. They're cohesively and correctly put in, and there's of course like the actual mystery behind it. So I don't know anything as a non-initiate really,
Right.
but just this one concept of the Iron Pentacle is a powerful one that I've used in readings for clients as a spread. I've like used a lot of, like, it's been a good system for me to like ground myself in any time that I find myself floating away or between like lessons or chapters in my path. It's just something I can come back to. So having a foundation, something like that is also good for people if they're ever asking me for advice. Please have a foundation. Ask me for advice.
I love that.
Anything.
I like the idea of having a way to check around. I'll definitely have to check out the Iron Pinnacle as a way to scan different things. And I love the idea of working with Astaroth. As I mentioned before, like today's like I like to put a day in between my paths whenever I'm path working. So today's like my day off from Golakab. So next is Gog Shavla for me, which Astaroth is the archdemon for. So I'll be working with them starting tomorrow. And I can't wait because coming from Golakab, it's probably going to feel like a sauna or like a spa day. Just a chance to relax. So if there was one thing that you could tell yourself when you first started off, one piece of advice you could give yourself as a beginner, what would it be? What do you
breaking the
wish that
rules.
you could have told yourself?
Well, it's so funny that like you phrase it like that because in a way, I have gone back to telling myself
I
things.
figured.
Yeah, and one of the things I keep telling myself when I go back to her is like literally like keep breaking the rules. Like keep breaking all these fucking rules people
I
tell you
love
are
it.
real, and
I
you'll
love it.
find that they're not fucking real, and the emperor has no goddamn clothes, and you can do this. And
Man.
so like and just keep doing it because you don't know what you're going to find. That it's a massive multiverse out there. um you know, just because the system you approach maybe does things like this particular way, like think outside of that box or
Yes.
see, add something in there. Like, yeah, for sure, try it the default way first, like get a vibe for it, but be like, what is this missing for me? What is this adding? And the other thing I would say too is, although you're new and it's like really easy to look at these like other witches that have all this knowledge and have all this experience that you don't have. And at the time that I was looking at it, there was a lot of coven versus solitary. If you were
Uh-huh.
solitary, you were assumed to not have any of the mysteries, and you
Right.
had to get mysteries from the coven. Well, fuck diddly d, like I acquired a lot of mysteries on my own
Uh-huh.
that a coven would have a hard time finding. You know, a coven may or may not actually find or have access to. I think it's a lot harder to get a group of people to do any left-hand path work together,
Right.
than do like a simple right-hand path type thing, or even a complex right-hand path thing, because there's all this structure, whereas the left-hand path, everyone's shadow and what the demons want to do, like it's just even just doing chaos magic where you are experimenting on just like one variable, right? I always think of chaos magic as like my sciencey witchcraft,
I love it.
my
Yeah.
sciencey magic. So I'm just like, okay, let me test a variable. And so I just go through the process again. I'm like, all right, we do the same sigil, the same conditions,
Yes.
approximately, and like, let's just change this fucking herb up because I don't know, and just see what it does. And sometimes like the aside from the blinds and shit that are in some literature, I think like a lot of literature doesn't need blinds because like people have just been copy paste for so long that it's not it. The sky is different. There's a 13th sign in the sky. You know what I mean? There's that we weren't previously counting, and now we have this new adjusted sky we can count. Why not go with that? That's what's actually happening. Why keep up with this like 100-year? Yeah, okay, I'll check it, I'll refer to it. It's still the previous knowledge. I'm not going to dismiss older knowledge, but I can't stop there. I have to continue. I have to move on. And I want anyone who feels like they have to like do things by the book to think about the fact that all the knowledge we have now was once UPG. All the knowledge we have now was once fucking UPG.
Yes.
And if you really want to be a pioneer in this, and if you really want to leave your mark in the magical world, if that's something you want to do, maybe you don't. Um, then you have to try new things, and you have to be scrutinized, and you have to be made fun of once in a while because people are like, "Why the fuck are you doing things like that?" Because they've never seen it before. But if you get it and you try it, you test it, it's consistent for you. First of all, use it for you. If you
Right.
want to see if it works for other people, have some buddies test it out. Like, have some people test it out. How does it work for them? Is it something that like has intensified their rituals? And like, I love now, like I have like buddies I can do rituals with,
Same.
that I previously just didn't have. And I'm like grateful to live in Salem where I can kind of like call up a few buddies to be like, okay, I know this friend is Wiccan. I know this friend has experience in like more comedic stuff. So like maybe this ritual would be good for all three of us where it's not so specifically my shit. Let's just give it a try. I
Mhm.
have friends that are like demon friendly. I have friends that are not. So like I just sort of like figure out, what I'm gonna do with somebody else. And then I of course have my solitary work, which is the majority of my work, and it's
Mhm.
I think the most important form of my work. But it's also great to see like other people be like, "Oh wow, this ritual is so intense." every time you ever go to like a public ritual or whatever, and everyone's like, wow, it was so intense, and you're like, it's like a
Yeah,
sneeze. It's a
basic.
sneeze that I
Yeah,
could have had an orgasm. Like you know what I mean? And everyone's like, oh, and you're like, yeah, it was good. Like I felt it. Like I went to like a public ritual a little while ago. It was actually a vampire ritual. It was pretty cool. And I know, and I've gone to some of the other services that they offer in private, and I know that they're a real deal, and I know what they're capable of. But they were very gentle with this, as they should be. It was a very gentle energy, but everyone else was like, "Oh my gosh, it was so intense," and I was like, "Oh yeah,
that's just an hors d'oeuvre.
it was tangible, like for
Uh-huh.
sure. It was very tangible and it was very attractive, and I reached a point where like my standard of like I'm so deep entrenched in this stuff now. I'm like, I don't know if I can ever return to this
Yeah,
like normie world. And I actually like tested myself. I like got like a very it's weird now. I'm kind of moonlighting. I'm working multiple jobs. So that's why I had to reschedule this so often. I'm so sorry. I was
no worries.
previously free on this day, and then I had a new job on this day. And like the hours were not what I predicted. So
No
I'm
worries.
moonlighting. I have like one job that is very witchy and is related. It's not. It's also like separate from like what I do. It's like a lot more love and light. It's a lot more
Mhm.
accessible to the public. It's a cute little store, tours, things like that. And I get the opportunity to share on what I know and all that. I can't get deep into like traditional witchcraft and all that because it's not. People are not ready. People are not ready to know the devil's real. Like they're just not ready. So so like I have to kind of pick and choose which parts of myself I'm sharing there, and then I'm working at this very like mundane job that I just sort of stumbled upon, and something completely new to me. I'm so used to being like, and this sounds like such a stupid brag, but like I'm used to being really good at everything I do.
I get
And
it.
so
Yeah,
people like hate me at new jobs because I'm good at it immediately.
and
And
quick
this is
learner.
something
Yeah.
that no matter how smart you are, no matter how strong you are, you don't know everything. And
Hmm.
you're gonna fuck up something if you're not paying attention, if you're not asking the right questions. So like I'm just enjoying being human at something. Like even though I'm a god now, like I'm enjoying being human at something and like
Uh-huh.
fucking it up and like just still being paid a great wage for it anyway. Like and I just like, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing, but it's actually not my fault. It's the company's like they didn't train me right, so it's not my problem. I'm just gonna sip my tea while it's a little busy because I can't do that one thing. Thank you. And then I step in and I make sure I'm contributing so I don't get fired. But it's very nice to have like something kind of mundane and something kind of like where I can be more communally focused and then this my shit, me.
Mhm.
So it's chaotic as hell, but I'm enjoying it. I forgot what the original question was. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's funny how you
ADD just
mentioned
went.
getting it. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's just like ADD just went off.
Hey, I get it. I get it. It's funny you mentioned how you get so deeply entrenched and meshed in this life that you can't go back. So often I'll try to explain something to somebody and I'll realize like, wait a minute, I'm like 3 years into the practice on this explanation. I need to go back. Because like I'm using terms and they're like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. But yeah, challenge conformity. That is such great advice. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I've had such a great time talking to you. We could probably keep talking, but we both have to go our own separate ways at some point. Maybe we'll have you on again in the future if that's something you're interested in.
Oh, that could be fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a good evening
Yeah.
and
Thank you
good
so much
rest
for
of the
having
week.
me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I had a great time talking with you, and you gave a lot of great advice. So I'll definitely be rewatching this video. And you have a channel yourself that you mentioned. Is that something that you'd like to plug now?
Sure. I mean, I'm real shit at the social media shit, even though
I am too.
but yeah, like it's a channel, Sanctuary Satanica. I post on it sometimes. Um, Have fun. I'm on Instagram almost every week, almost. So if you want to know what I'm up to, or you want to know what I'm vague posting about my spirituality, like go check out my Instagram. Occasionally there's a boob. But yeah, just stick around for my altar pics and for my weird like high thoughts that make it in there. I mentioned the cliff off a lot. But yeah, my YouTube is where fun stuff happens. I'm trying to make more videos where I'm demonstrating certain things, but lately there's not a lot of things I can show. So a
Yeah,
lot of theory right now, y'all. Sorry.
it's all good. I love hearing theories. Theories come together to make practice, so there's nothing wrong with that. Awesome. Well, I mean, was there anything else that you wanted to cover? I think
Oh,
we.
well, I just want to say, like, I appreciate this series. Like, it's a really cool idea. I like the
Awesome.
questions. I'm excited to see where you go with this project. Thank you for involving me in it. I think that's really cool.
Of course. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on. And like I said, maybe in the future we'll have like an update and see where you are then. Until then, until
Yeah.
then, yeah, take care, be safe, and enjoy your travels.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.